here. There you go.
Excellent.
Very official. All right, we will get started this evening. So welcome everybody. This is the June meeting of the Nevada County Camera Club. Happy to see you guys. And I'm Rachel Rosenthal. I'm the president for this year. So I've got a few announcements for you, and then I will turn it over to Kathy, who will introduce our presenter. And then we'll take a quick break and then come back for the critique, which we do every month. So as you heard, we are recording. It's now very official through the Zoom app itself. And so we're not muting people automatically, which we used to do. And Kathy and I are watching the sound bar over here, the participants list. So if there is background noise, we may mute you. So, all right. I only have a couple of announcements for folks tonight. I know on my mind and the board's mind, I'm guessing all of you, is when are we going to return to in-person meetings? And so thank you. We did send a survey out last few weeks ago, and we had 57 respondents. So thank you to those who did respond. And the message, the results from the survey respondents is pretty clear, as folks are very excited about returning to in-person and are planning to attend when we go back to in-person. And so what the plan is I'm going to take the survey results, have been shared with the board. We've got a board meeting on July 6th. And so we'll review those results in detail, and then I'll send out an email to folks and let you know how the board's going to proceed and when we're going to go back to in-person. In the survey, we said in August. So depending on how things go with COVID, I hope that that's the case, but you'll get an email to confirm that for sure. But yeah, very clear. Folks cannot wait to get back together. And I hope it's sooner rather than later. So more to come on that. Let's see, just a couple of FYIs. I sent out an email, excuse me, about the Nevada County Fair. And that was more for the newer folks, because that's really been a big deal for this club, is submitting your images to the photography competition of the Nevada County Fair. Those entries are due July 26th. Everybody, all artwork is accepted and there's no fee to apply. So this is a perfect way to enter a piece if you've not submitted for exhibition before. And if you have any questions about doing that, you can reach out to any of the board members. And I know many people in the club would be happy to help you if you want to know some more details on how that works. Also, another big one for this club is people submit to the California State Fair down in Sacramento. I looked that up today and it still says postponed because the State Fair itself, because they're using the site as a vaccination center. And so it just says postponed until late September. So more to come, but it's certainly not going to be in the next couple of months. So we'll be watching for the State Fair to see if they schedule that this year. And that's all I have this evening. I want to see if there's other announcements, and I'm sure there must be a few. I wanted to check in with Mike. Shay, did you have anything that you wanted to share tonight, Mike?
No, not really.
Okay.
We do have a new laptop. So when we return to in-person, we'll be ready to go, because the old laptop had problems with the monitor, with the screen. So anyway, that's the only thing I have to say.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I'll jump to Bill Wages on field trips. Anything to share with the crew?
No, right now we just have that one scheduled for July 9th, 3 o'clock up in the Donner train tunnels. So I figured to go in there for, a few hours, and even if it's warm, it's always a few degrees cooler, probably 10 degrees cooler or so inside the tunnels. So it might be kind of refreshing, and hopefully the heat wave dies down though. But then after that, we'll come out of the tunnels and go down towards the Rainbow Bridge and check out the petroglyphs and all that, maybe for the sunset. So.
Okay. And remind folks, Bill, how to sign up.
Yeah, just go ahead and email me. Hopefully everybody got the email that Rachel sent out for to register. Just go ahead and send me an email if you'd like. And the plan is you could either meet us there, and in the email there's directions on how to get there, or I'll be at the Safeway parking lot in downtown Grass Valley if they want a caravan or kind of arrange for carpools and stuff. So.
Okay.
and feel free to reach out if you have any questions on anything. Also, right now, if you're kind of into some wildflowers, the Sierra Discovery Trail out on Bowman Lake Road, I guess they're called tiger lilies and stuff, and they had some nice wildflowers out there the other day. So it's kind of a nice little easy place to get to and an easy hike and stuff. So I was out there the other day, and I'll post some photos tomorrow on Facebook. For those that follow me, they'll see the flowers. Lots of butterflies out there as well. So if you want to go chasing those little creatures around, that's a lot of fun too. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Bill. So next up on gallery shows, I know Dave McClellan, and Ellen's not with us just yet, but she will be. So Dave, you've got a couple of announcements, I know.
Yeah, so the next gallery show at Nevada City Picture Framing is coming up in a couple of weeks. That mid-July, we'll be putting that one up. Everybody that's participating has been notified about which images to prepare for that. So we're looking forward to that. The other announcement I have is about the Gold Country on Camera Photo Challenge. And that's coming up in August. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. For new members or those who have not participated before, the Gold Country on Camera is a 48-hour photographic challenge for Nevada County Camera Club members. And the challenge is designed to encourage creativity in your photography and to step outside of your comfort zone in both your shooting and your post-processing. And how this works is a map of Grass Valley in Nevada City has been divided into grids, and participants will draw a grid number from a hat, and then you will have 48 hours to photograph inside that grid. And some aspects of the challenge will probably be different again this year, depending on COVID restrictions. But we hope that the Friday night launch and the Friday night opening gala and a very public open studios tour will occur this year. And you should have received a mail from Rachel yesterday that has all the information in there. And starting today, participants can register on a special photo challenge website. And since this website is not part of the Camera Club site, you'll need to create a login for the photo challenge. And if you were part of it last year, that login may still work. Participants will create one work of art to enter and display during the exhibit in October. And that exhibit will coincide with the Center for the Arts Open Studios tour. And so between now and August 15th, you can register online, and timelines and dates and detailed instructions are included in the email invitation on the challenge website and the email you got yesterday. It costs $20 to participate. And hopefully we'll have a live launch party at Nevada City Picture Framing in Nevada City on Friday, August 20th at 7 o'clock. And at that launch party, that is when you'll be briefed on the challenge rules and draw your shooting location from a hat. And after that, you've got the weekend of August 20th till Sunday, August 22nd to shoot an image of any style or any subject that is within the location shown on your grid map. And the primary subject, this is the big rule, the primary subjects must be found within your selected grid, and nothing or no one can be added to the shooting location. There are no restrictions on the type or style of presentation or processing you choose to create your art, but it needs to be based on your photograph. And once we have all the artwork ready to display, a jury of art professionals that are not club members will judge the submitted artwork for artistic merit and will issue awards. And then hopefully on Friday, October 8th, if COVID restrictions allow, we'll have a opening exhibit gala at Nevada City Picture Framing where your artwork will be on display and all members and their families are welcome. And then that same weekend, the exhibit will be on display for the first weekend of the Center for the Arts Open Studios tour, and that will be open to the general public. And so we'll keep you posted as time gets closer and guidelines might change depending on the COVID situation. So check your email for your invitation. And remember that the registration website is different than the Camera Club site. And that information is in that email, what that link is. And we hope that you'll participate in this fun and challenging projects. It's an opportunity to expand your creativity and imagination in your photography, as well as in the finished presentation of your artwork. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Dave? Anybody good? Okay, thanks, Dave. That's always a, excuse me, challenging and fun exhibition to participate in. So please consider it if you have not done it before. All right, so are there any other announcements? All is quiet. Okay. All right, so with that, I will turn it over to Kathy, our Vice President, who will introduce our speaker for this evening.
All right, thank you, Rachel. And thank you, everybody else. Charles Needle has joined us tonight. He is an award-winning Colorado-based fine art photographer. He's an author. He's obviously a speaker, and he's also a workshop leader, and we will hear more about that too. He has authored instructional books and writing. He writes for multiple publications. He has an extensive biography and a great number of workshops. And I'm just going to refer you to his website for more information, which is www.charlesneedlephoto.com. And it's also on our website on the opening page, so that we can use all our time tonight soaking up inspiration and education about crafting impressionistic looking photographs. If you'd like to ask questions of Charles, please write them in the chat box and we'll get to them after his presentation. Let's let him get through. And we're fortunate also that Charles has agreed to share critique duties with Ellen Davis tonight. So with that very short intro, please welcome Charles Needle.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Rachel. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. There's certain advantages, of course, to COVID from where I sit. I can now speak to clubs all over the world. And so it's really exciting. And I just love sharing. And hopefully I'm going to talk about some things that will shake things up a bit for you, give you kind of a whack on the side of the head, so to speak, and make you think differently, see differently, and do some creative things. It's pretty timely, I guess, too, in light of that whole exercise that Dave just went through of, that contest coming up. So there's a lot you can do with what's right in front of you. So this is hopefully going to really open your eyes and lots of other possibilities of things you could do. So I enjoy spending most of the time behind the camera, not necessarily doing a ton of post-processing. But with that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about that because not everybody has multiple exposure feature in their cameras. But if you've played around with it, we can't really take a poll, but I hope a lot of you have played around with using, yeah, I see some hands going up, that's good. With using the multiple exposure feature. I think it's the most underutilized, one of the most underutilized tools that's sort of hidden in a camera today. It's in SLRs, it's in mirrorless cameras, point and shoot cameras, even phones. There's apps. I'll cover that real briefly at the end, just touch on that, because everything I'm going to show you is totally possible using your phone. And I really love my 12 Pro Max. It's always with me. I use it kind of as a visual sketch pad and have a whole nother presentation about smartphone photography too. But anyway, so let me share my screen. Are we okay with the audio and everything? Everybody can hear pretty well, I would think. Okay, let's jump right in. So can everybody see the screen there?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. And there is a point, Kathy, in sort of midway through here where I could pause for like, I don't know, 5 minutes of questions and then take the rest at the end if you want to do it that way, or we could just save them all for the end, whatever you want to do.
Okay, thanks for the offer. We'll play by ear. How's that?
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to talk about 7 ways to use your camera kind of as a paintbrush. There are way more than 7, of course. We're going to just cover 7 right here for this evening. And I'm not going to go through every single one right now, because as we get to each one, I'll define them for you and all of that. And by the way, if you want to take notes, you're welcome to, take notes with this. If you want to, take pictures of the screen, you can. This is being recorded, I guess. So you'll be able to go back and review it. But anyway, I'm just going to go right into each one and not try to define
Hold on, everybody went to, Charles, can you
I
stop?
see
it?
that.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
okay.
I don't know what happened.
No worries. Yeah. Okay. So in a perfect world, you need to at least back up a little bit and talk about the type of equipment that you might want to consider when you're doing this kind of photography. Really, though, the basics are just having a camera, ideally that has multiple exposure feature built in, and then some kind of telephoto zoom. It doesn't matter exactly what the focal length is, but some sort of telephoto lens is going to really go a long way with this. And I'll talk about what lens I happen to use. Having a macro lens that has a collar, and when I say collar, most of you probably understand what I mean, but I'll illustrate what that is also in just a minute. And then having a variable neutral density filter wouldn't hurt. And again, this is, money's no object. I'm going to go out and buy all of this tomorrow kind of thing. The variable ND filter, of course, great for waterfalls and anything with slow shutter speeds. And then a close-up lens. I have a whole nother lecture on creative macro photography as well that I don't have time to give you tonight. But one of my favorite ways of doing close-ups is to actually use something like a 500D, or I think Canon may have temporarily stopped making that 500D. You might be able to find a used one, but there's another close-up filter made by ProMaster. It's the +5 achromatic close-up filter or close-up lens. So if you use that in conjunction with a macro lens, the two of them together, it screws onto the front of your macro lens, you'll be taken into a whole new world of close-up photography. So that's just a little bit on that. And then a ball head, you don't have to have a ball head. I just happen to have one, love the ball head. It is versatile because you can kind of move it all around in different directions. And it's easy to adjust the tension, which you'll find out in a minute why I'm suggesting you vary the tension according to whatever technique you're going to be doing. And then things like lens babies. Most of you may know what a lens baby is. It's kind of a selective focus lens. There's another lens called a kaleidoscope that I'm going to talk about in this presentation that you may not have heard of, that's completely different from a lens baby. And then, of course, we can't forget the good old smartphone. All right, so now these are some of the SLRs out there. This is by no means a comprehensive list of cameras that can do anywhere from 2 to 10 exposures in the camera. So this is a little bit different than HDR, where we're kind of like merging various exposures to increase dynamic range. This is where you're basically just sandwiching all these images together, like whether it's 2 or 3 or however many, and the camera basically takes all those frames, combines them into one single frame. So it's pretty exciting when you see what the possibilities are. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, there are lots of point and shoot cameras as well that have built-in multiple exposure capability. Usually you can find this in the shooting menu on most of the cameras out there. Here's a giant list of mirrorless cameras too that can do multiple exposures. So it's really exciting, and I think a direction that you could go in if you feel like you're in a rut, especially. And you may not like all these things I'm about to show you, and that's totally fine. Pick one of them if one of them speaks to you, and just practice that one and go with that. I can't emphasize enough that we really need to be photographing to please ourselves first and foremost. I think with all this technology, we get caught up in, judges and all that stuff. Just shoot to make your own heart sing. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox about that. And anyway, so this is the 70 to 200. And this is kind of my go-to lens for, I'd say, 90 to 95% of what I'm about to show you. Not to say you have to have this exact lens, but remember, I was just saying any telephoto lens. So something in the 70 to 300 or 400 millimeter range would work, and preferably a zoom lens. And you can see this lens, this particular one from Nikon, happens to come with a built-in lens collar. So that's that little ring at the back of the lens that's right next to where the camera body is. And you see a little knob there. So I could turn that knob, of course, and be able to go vertical or horizontal or any orientation in between. So it's handy to have that little collar when we get to talking about rotating and zooming and some other fun things. So, but if you don't have a collar, I'm going to tell you how you can work around that and still get some really cool images. Now, when you're on a tripod, doesn't hurt to be reminded, we need to turn vibration reduction or image stabilization off, and then use a manual focus if you can, if you trust your eyesight. There's only one technique I'm going to talk about where you really must use manual focus. The rest you could kind of fudge it and use autofocus if that's what you're accustomed to. So that's the story on that. Now, I think most of you recognize our friend here, Claude Monet. I've had the amazing privilege of actually being able to teach in Monet's garden in France with private access for the last like 20 some years. I'm hoping with COVID that they're still going to allow this, but we go in after the garden closes for a couple of hours for an entire week and stay in the village of Giverny, and it's just very fun and exciting. You can almost feel Monet's spirit in this garden when you're in there without any tourists. But anyway, he said here, to see, we must forget the name of the thing we're seeing. And so with Impressionist work or Impressionist painters, this of course from Monet, it was all about, you know, not necessarily giving you a literal representation of what is in the scene in front of them. They like to work in real contrasty light, you know, with lights and darks. And whereas with photography, we tend to want to shoot in bright overcast light if we're doing something like a garden or a more intimate scene like this. But for painters, it's kind of the opposite. But what's really awesome is when you're doing a lot of these techniques I'm about to talk about, you can shoot in any kind of light. It could be bright overcast, it could be noon, you know, super bright, sunny, contrasty light, all kinds of light. This works really well. So that's one of the fun things about it. And of course, you know, we know these are water lilies, but it's not a literal representation of those water lilies. And it was all about using loose brush strokes, the Impressionist painters. So we're going to try and mimic the look of loose brush strokes here with our camera. And I love this quotation from Freeman Patterson. Freeman, if you're not familiar with him, I highly recommend you check out his website, freemanpatterson.com. He lives in British Columbia. He's in his early 80s, still rides his Harley. He's an amazing guy. He's one of the real pioneers in visual design and explaining why a photograph works from a visual design standpoint. He's written numerous books. The most popular one, or one that I think belongs on every photographer's bookshelf, is called I think it's called Photography and the Art of Seeing or something like that. But anyway, he's just an amazing human being and photographer. And I've actually had the privilege of co-teaching with him in various locations around the world. So we're talking about doing some more. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, all right. So the 7 different techniques, remember there are more than 7, but I'm just going to touch on 7 tonight. So multiple exposure Monet, this is just kind of a term that I came up with after practicing a lot of this stuff in Monet's garden. And it's basically using the multiple exposures to make an image that looks painterly by changing how they're aligned. So they're slightly out of alignment or out of registration. Now it can be done in Photoshop. So stand by, I'm going to talk about how there's a real easy way to do it in Photoshop as well. But if you want to experiment with doing this in camera, it's a lot of fun. So this is how you would activate the multiple exposure feature in your camera. I'll show you there's all kinds of settings that are possible. And this, of course, is just the Nikon. All the different cameras are going to vary slightly. But with the Nikon, it's in the shooting menu, and most of the cameras, it is in the shooting menu. And you basically will go into multiple exposure and see these various options. So we can turn the multiple exposure mode on in one of 2 ways. One is to do single photo, the other is series. For single, that means you're going to merge those shots together and then it goes back to normal shooting. So if I chose to merge 3 images, it would do those 3 shots and then go back to normal, you know, single frame shooting. If I choose series, it'll do those 3 shots, then it'll do the next 3 shots, then it'll keep going till, you know, you tell it to stop. So when you're first learning this, I suggest putting it on single photo because that's going to be the easiest way to kind of not get confused, but you have that option. And then you can also, of course, dial in the number of shots, and I'm using, you know, the little toggle in the upper right there of my back of my camera to change all of these settings. I can go, in my case, all the way up to 10 frames if I'd like. Okay, so really exciting. Even if you have just 2, that can be really fun, or 3. So don't worry if you don't have 10. And I'm going to show you the way to work around this in Photoshop too. And then if you, one thing about this here, auto gain, it's kind of like, I'd like to think of it as the little elf inside the camera that knows how to do all the, exposure compensating, and you don't have to think. So just leave auto gain on. Otherwise, you might not get a properly exposed image. But in general, you just basically follow the meter as if it's a single shot and just shoot according to the indicated meter reading. So it's really fantastic. Wait till you, that's so exciting. I love sharing this stuff. Anyway, so multiple exposure will be on and active if you've done all those settings right. Now you have roughly 60 seconds or so before it goes back off and returns to normal shooting. So you have to kind of be set up and have something in mind already of what you want to be photographing. So in this case, just to illustrate, I'm pointing the camera just at a white wall. Okay, so find the focus point wherever it is. You don't have to move it, just find it. Okay, so in my case, there it is. And this is just kind of a little helpful formula for you. You don't have to follow this to the letter, but if you think of, like, we're going to do for this multiple Monet 3 shots, and I suggest you use a small aperture. So something like f/16 in this case, you can see, or 22, or f/99. Don't you wish we had f/99? Just a small aperture. And I know, they say, oh, don't use small aperture, it's going to cause distortion and whatever. Well, we're doing impressionistic imagery anyway, so it's not going to matter if there's a slight amount of distortion here. But anyway, so basically, if you were to think of this as 3 shots, so your first shot is not doing a thing, but just take the shot. Okay, I mean, you find your scene, get it all set up, then you basically just take your first frame. Don't move the camera at all, don't do anything. Then on the second and third shots, here's what you do. So you're going to kind of grasp the sides of your camera. I wish this was in person, but anyway, you basically just take the camera and force it up, kind of up and to the right, and take your second shot and then let it back down. Then on the third one, you force it up and to the left and take the third shot. So it's almost like a letter V that you're doing here. And you don't have to necessarily move it real tightly like I'm showing you here. I'm going to show you some other ones where I loosened the ball on the ball head and did it a lot looser and got a completely different look. But when you combine these 3 images that are slightly out of alignment, you'll see what happens here. Now, this is in Monet's garden, and I put this scene in here for a few reasons. One of the things to point out that works really well with all of this is things that have color contrast and tonal contrast. So we have both of those going on in this scene, of course. Now, this was early on when I was practicing this, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that as just a straight, lovely garden shot, but why not sort of kick it up a notch? But when I was practicing early on, I realized, this may not work so well if I'm set up like this, but I learned later, you want to have small points of color, kind of, or small dots, if you will, like we have of the white there in the middle ground. The pink tulips in the foreground didn't work so well in this because they're kind of blobby and I'm too close to them. So I would, if I were to do this over again, I'd back up and then, zoom in so that those tulips don't look quite as blobby. But anyway, if you pay attention to what happened in the middle and background on this, I think it's really, you get the idea of what we're doing here. No, you don't need to adjust your eyesight. I mean, yes, it does kind of look blurry, but if you look at these at a distance and look at them, printed on canvas, it really can resemble paintings. And some, of course, are going to fail. Others are going to be more successful, but it's digital. So why not experiment and play around? This one, I think, was a little more successful. This was also in Monet's garden. So I just kind of set up this scene with, I was looking at the various shapes and colors and all of that, and moved the camera a little more loosely in this case and came up with that. So you get different looks with different ways you're moving. And that's what's so fun about this. It's really unpredictable and you can just keep going and not be afraid to fail. This was another one that I really think worked well. So again, nothing wrong with this as just a straight shot, but if you apply the multiple exposure Monet technique to that, you get something really, I think, exciting that you see there on the right. I didn't move the camera radically, but I did move it in such a way where, like you can still see that there's a tree there and the tree trunk kind of stayed in the same spot. But it's just really amazing kind of what happened there by moving the camera just a little bit. So very exciting. Now in this one, this was also from Monet's garden. I worked with this scene, kind of a boring scene otherwise, but I noticed, of course, the bands of color and all of that. And what I did was move the camera a lot looser. Like I think I may have even taken it off the tripod here, but I'd still kept it sort of contained because I wanted to maintain that dark band of coleus there, in the upper third of the image. And by doing a little bit more movement, taking it off the tripod, I got a look like this. So, I mean, to me, that really kind of looks like a painting. It actually ended up being the cover of my book, which I'll talk about at the end. But anyway, and then this is another scene that's really cool. If you come across, lavender fields or things with repeating patterns and negative space, it's really fun to try this sort of intentional movement of the camera. And remember, I'm not making the exposure while the camera is moving. I'm just, moving the camera to a different spot and making different exposures. And the camera is merging it all together. So you get this immediate feedback in the back of the camera. This is made at the Butchart Gardens or Butcher Gardens up in British Columbia, one of my favorite gardens in all of North America. I teach there every year, probably not this year because of COVID, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. There's not a weed anywhere. If you ever get a chance to get there, by all means, take it, whether you go with me or just on your own. It's just an amazing, amazing place. So that was one that I made with like 10 exposures, I think, in that case. So, and again, this is just a taste thing. You may not like these, that's totally fine, but I'm going to show you some other cool stuff, hopefully, that you will like. I really like what's happening under the tree here. This was also in Monet's garden with those flowers. And then, things like, this was in Napa Valley. I was teaching a workshop there one year, and it was getting to be, close to lunchtime and everybody's packing up and whatever. I'm like, oh no, we got harsh light here, but you can soften all these shadows by using this Monet technique to make something like that look even softer. And then with the holidays, I mean, I can't take a shot like this anymore without feeling compelled to try a multiple exposure afterwards. Nothing wrong with that, as a straight shot of a tree, but what about, moving the camera slightly, and it just kind of brings the tree alive and makes it glow even more. So lots of fun, play around. I really encourage you to just experiment with all of this. All right, so that's the Monet. Now we're gonna do the same sort of idea of moving the camera, but instead of moving it slightly out of alignment this time, we're gonna go up or down. Like, so if you have a vertical subject like a tree, it's awesome to move the camera up or down multiple times. You don't have to go in very big increments. Again, with this, I would choose a small aperture, something like 16 or 22, and you want to just move ever so slightly. I mean, I wish I could demonstrate it, like I said, in person here, but it's almost imperceptible, how little you move it. And so a little movement goes a long way when you're doing these kinds of things. And so this was up at Mount Rainier. I lived in Seattle for about 10 years and loved going up there in the wintertime because you get scenes like this where, there's this sort of rhythm or pattern of trees. They're a little clumped up together there on the left, but I set this shot up and I was like, okay, so why not try a tilt on this, see what happens. So when you're doing these tilts, I would suggest if you can make as many as 5, start out with like something like 5 or 7. Why I keep picking odd numbers, I don't know, but anyway, it doesn't have to be an odd number. But anyway, something like that, between 5 or 7 or 9. And then watch what happens, when you do that sort of vertical movement with that. So to me, like this sort of looked like a Japanese painting. And so when you have situations, whether you're at the ocean or in the wintertime where it's high contrast, think about trying the tilting with trees. And then this was in Colorado here with some aspens, and the ferns, of course, were in the forest floor, and that helped to kind of bring that added color to the bottom there. When you're doing an image with trees like this, if you have a sky that's kind of white and ugly and you don't really want to include it, I suggest you start right below that sky and come down. If you want to include the sky though, start low and go up, and you'll probably end up including some of the sky. So if you have an attractive sky, then you might want to start at the bottom and go up. And then this is, to me, like a Seurat painting, very pointless. This was just a dogwood, a single tree, but it was isolated against kind of a neutral background. The foliage back there is pretty even tone, and so it made it, I think, stand out even more with this. So there are other ways to do this if you can't do it in camera. So this would be really tedious, but I'm going to just suggest, if you wanted to, just to make you think a little bit about this, you could get a variable ND filter or some way of blocking the light coming into the lens. So let's say we can get here an exposure time of, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds by dialing this down. Even on a bright sunny day, these filters reduce the amount of light coming in. And so if you were able to get a real slow shutter speed, 5-10 seconds, let's say, you could take your camera and then set it up on your scene and just kind of make real small jerky movements, and then it would mimic the look of a multiple exposure. So you could experiment with that if you want. But this, I think, is a little bit easier, better way of doing it. And if you would like, I could send this to Kathy or to Rachel or whatever, and you guys can play around with this. But basically what you do is install what's called a script, which is sort of like an action in Photoshop, into the scripts folder of Photoshop. And I can send this with instructions to Kathy or Rachel. But anyway, it's got instructions plus these 2 JSX files. And these JSX files are what you're going to dump into or copy into the scripts folder there in Photoshop. So it's a little tricky, but I walk you through it in the handout that comes with it. But anyway, so if you've done it right and you've installed it properly, you can also email me for this too, but it might be easier if I just give this to Kathy. Watch what happens. So if you've installed it properly, you go into the file menu of Photoshop and under scripts, okay, which is something I never even used or didn't know it was there, prior to learning about this. And then you find the 2 JSX files that you installed. So if you did it properly, you'll see them there. One says layer stack opacity blending, the other says integrated. The only one you're going to use is the one that ends in integrated. However, you do need to install both. Why you have to do that, I have no idea, but just install both. You only use the one that says integrated. And this is sort of like an action, okay? So it's an automated process. So when you choose integrated, you're going to get this dialog box. And it's pretty simple from here. You just browse to your images. So you can put any number of images, unlimited number, in here. They don't have to be JPEG. They could be TIFFs. They could be RAW. They could be whatever. Keep in mind, however, if you choose, like 75 RAW images, it's going to take quite a while to crunch through that. So just be aware of that. And then don't check, I repeat, do not check that box that says attempt to automatically align the source images, because that's going to defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do here. So don't check that box. You can, if you wish, check the one that says create smart object after loading. If you know what smart objects are and you're familiar with working with smart objects and all of that, you can certainly check that. And then once you've done that, you just press OK and watch it happen. So the images will merge together into a single image, just like it would do in camera. And if you are savvy enough to know about the history palette, how to unravel the history in Photoshop, you could look at each layer and adjust the opacity and fine tune it. But 9 times out of 10, it nails it. Like I've found that I don't have to go back in and do too many adjustments afterwards. So very exciting. I mean, this opens up possibilities for everyone. Of course, you have to have Photoshop to do it. But anyway, but the way you shoot all of these, the method of shooting is exactly the same, whether it's in camera or doing it this way. And one other suggestion, those of you who are thinking of doing it this way, or you don't have the ability to do it in your camera, I suggest you take a picture of like your finger or your hand before you start doing your series of shots. So let's say, you know, I'm going to do 5. I would take a picture of my hand first, then do the 5 shots, and then take another picture of my hand at the end of the 5 shots. And that way, you know, when you bring them up into Bridge or Lightroom or whatever, you'll be able to find them easier and not be as confused. So that's just a little tip there. All right, so now soft glow. When we talk about a soft glow, this is the one technique where you really have to use manual focus. The rest of the ones, you know, you could get away with auto, but we really have to use manual, and you'll see why. This is also referred to as the Orton effect, O-R-T-O-N. So a lot of you may already have tried this or know about it. There's a guy named Michael Orton who invented it. But essentially, it's taking 2 or more. I've actually been experimenting lately with 3 images. And the first one is at a sharp focus, manually focused, of course, and a small aperture. And then the second one is out of focus, manually, like you intentionally throw the image way out of focus and put the aperture on the widest aperture setting. And then you can, if you want, do a third shot. And that's what I've been experimenting with, where you take a third one that's racked out of focus even more than the second one was. And you'll see what happens here. It just creates this amazing glow sort of on your subject. So this was another scene from Monet's garden. I'm going to just illustrate here how much you defocus. When you defocus that lens, you want to do it quite a bit. It's kind of like, you know, those of you who wear glasses or contacts, it's like the way the world looks when you take your glasses off. It's a lot. And when you defocus, you want to make sure that the subject grows bigger rather than shrinks down. You know how when you mess with your focus ring, sometimes it gets a little bigger, sometimes it shrinks. You want the subject to grow bigger so that you get that sort of glow about it. So a lot of defocusing involved with this manually. Now, this is just my scene, nothing wrong with this intimate garden scene. And this was up on Whidbey Island near Seattle. And we got what they call a sunbreak in the Pacific Northwest, like the sun popped out for 10 seconds when I went to make my second exposure. And it created, of course, even more of a glow. And I probably toned down some of those highlights. But you see on the left, particularly, kind of how effective it was on the scene, just kind of romanticizes the scene. Here's a situation in Georgia. I was shooting at Callaway Gardens, which is an amazing place just south of Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta, by the way, originally. I'm trying to lose the accent. Sorry, I apologize. Anyway, it creeps in there. But this was Callaway, and I just, you know, I was imagining the couple, they're holding hands and they walk in and sit on the bench, and, you know, so it was just sort of a scene that was calling for that treatment to me. And so that's how I did that with the 2 shots. And then here's another one from the Bouchard Gardens. This is the Rose Garden. Just an incredible place, this Bouchard Gardens. Can't say enough great stuff about it. This was another one that was made in France with the wisteria and the cherry blossoms. So, you know, you can just soften the image. Now, there are ways to do this in the computer, you know, negative clarity. You could also try, you know, I've seen people make a soft focus filter by putting Vaseline on the front of a skylight filter, you know, and just shoot through the Vaseline. Or you could, you know, take pantyhose, put that over the lens. I've seen all kinds of fun things, you know, you could try. But anyway, here's another example of how that glow works with just a single. This is actually that same dogwood I showed you before, where it looked like a Seurat painting. And so anyway, and it just is really cool. Now, here I broke the rule, so to speak. Instead of making the first shot at a small aperture and focusing, I did the first shot at a wide aperture and focused. And then I did the second shot also at a wide aperture, but I defocused. So by doing that, it maintained, of course, the shallow depth of field, and I was able to keep that background soft. So same idea here with this tulip. That's, you know, real flowers behind there, no setups or anything. All right. Now, that's the soft glow montage. You can also do what I call a composite montage. And a lot of you may have tried this already. It's a lot of fun to combine 2 images that are either the same subject or even different subjects. Here is the classic example, of course, would just be like a flower with texture. Now, in this case, I was in a cemetery and there were some zinnias growing. And so I took a shot of the zinnia and then I swung the camera around and did the texture from one of the tombstones, in the second shot. So, but if I were not in that situation, I would just do it, manually with the script, or you can also do it with blending modes yourself in Photoshop with combining 2 layers if you wanted to do it that way, and didn't want it to be as automated as the script is. But it's a lot of fun to just play around with combining images with texture is another example. Not as successful, I don't think, and then this one, so this was really fun. I was at a lotus farm and I did a shot of the lotus with pretty shallow depth of field. And then I saw these, the duckweed, in the corner of my eye, and so I filled the frame with the duckweed. And because the duckweed was a darker tonality than the lotus, it just sort of bled through, so to speak. So typically I don't shoot a ton of like really bright white flowers, but for montaging something like this or combining it in this way, it can be really effective. And this was in Holland. I'm actually going to be going next year to Keukenhof. I've taught there several years. It's another awesome garden that's just outside Amsterdam. Thousands and thousands of just bulbs everywhere, hyacinth, tulips, you name it. And another one that should be on your bucket list if you love gardens. But anyway, this was just tulips with grass behind them. And the texture there is coming from a second shot of just some white tulips that had collected and gathered all together closely. They were really jam-packed close together in the corner of, again, like the duckweed was, in the corner of a pond that was nearby. And so, I had no idea what was going to happen. It just added another sort of layer of texture. And then you can also think about, collecting file folders of patterns and textures and things. So this is a wall hanging, metal wall hanging, and I just combined it with this Gerber daisy. So just think outside the box, try and, think in creative ways. That's what this is all about. Here's another one where I pointed straight down at the grass, just did a boring shot of the grass, but then I swung the camera up and did this pagoda, and I had no idea what would happen, but it gave this really kind of cool texture with the image. And then this is just to illustrate how you can do the same subject twice or multiple times. So the first shot here, this was pouring down rain. I'm on my stomach, like on this ground cloth. I'm wearing rain pants. It's pouring down, and that is a real raindrop there. And I've got the cable release in one hand, the umbrella in another. And I did the shot of the one, fiddle, I guess that's a fiddlehead fern. And then the second one, by the time I recomposed and, moved the camera up, the drop had fallen, which actually I think ended up being kind of a happy accident there. And both of those were at the wider aperture. If I had done one at a smaller aperture, it would have messed up the depth of field there. So this is one point where we could pause for brief questions if people have, but then I'll answer some more. I'll be glad to at the very end. Does anybody have
there were questions piling up here.
Okay, good.
So
No
we'll start
problem.
here. Explain why the VC should be turned off when the camera is on a tripod. Different experts seem to have different opinions about this. Does on/off depend on the specific lens used?
Yeah, so I have always been taught that you should have it off, because if you do have it on and you're on a tripod and you're already stabilized, it's sort of like redundant to have it turned on. At least that's the way I was taught. Maybe there are reasons you might want that, I don't know. Maybe somebody, who's shooting wildlife, it might be necessary. I don't really know. But in general, if you're just doing, something that's not where the subject is not moving, it's a good idea to have it off, because you'll hear that motor going and it'll actually try and shake the camera a little. And when you do that, of course, you get a blurry image. But I could definitely see leaving it on for wildlife.
Rachel wrote that she's read that with newer lenses, it's not necessary to turn off.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Jonathan said, my camera, Nikon D7100, has multiple exposure grayed out. Do you have any suggestion for that?
You might, I don't know if it's because you're maybe in JPEG plus RAW mode or JPEG, well, actually it does work, I think, in JPEG, but try playing around with those settings and see if it fixes it. Or you might also have exposure compensation accidentally turned on. That's another reason, but these are great questions. I love it. Yeah.
Do you always use a tripod?
No, I do not. So yeah, that's another great question. I would say about 60% I use it for these kinds of images. When I'm doing regular straight photography, it depends what I'm doing, but I find myself using the tripod less and less just because of the higher ISO capabilities now of the newer cameras and all that.
Okay. And lastly, we got an answer, but I'm going to let you answer this. What is the garden name in Holland? And somebody offered it's Keukenhof.
Yes, Keukenhof. It's weird spelling, but I can spell it if anybody wants to.
I think we've got it here.
It's in the chat probably, yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, but yeah, amazing place.
So
So-
that's what we have so far. Does anybody
Great.
else have any more questions?
Okay,
I think we can go.
awesome, great. Thanks for monitoring that because I can't follow that and talk at the same time.
No problem.
All right, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit now and talk about intentional camera movement. Now, a lot of you probably done this on accidentally and just kind of erased an image kind of thing. And you may think you know a lot about it already, but I'm gonna maybe show you a few little things that you might not have thought of with doing this rotating and so forth of the camera and moving the camera. Now, this is not a shot I would do every day, but I just kind of threw it in here to show you how you could, if you had a lens, that's got a collar on it, loosen that collar, and then in a single exposure, just gently sort of spin the lens around and you'd get something like this. Depends on how fast you spin it. Of course, it's always going to be sharper toward the center. But sometimes these are good for, background slides or whatever. You could lay type over some of these. So it's just fun to experiment. And in general, you're going to be using like shutter speeds of like, I'd say half a second or slower to get these effects here. This is a better example of spinning the camera. And then you can experiment too with actually, if you get, let's say 2 or 3 seconds in your exposure time, actually holding the camera still before you actually start spinning. And by doing that, you get part of the image sort of sharp. So in this case, that's why some of those stars are sharp. Now, here's an example just again of spinning, but of course with this one, I used the multiple exposure feature and I just set it up on this one pansy blossom and, went to town on that. And the same idea here with this field of flowers, you could do that as well with spinning. Now, this one will really make you think. This is not a cropped image. So by default, when you rotate around each time slightly, it's going to be rotating from the center. But in this case, I moved the point of rotation every single time I was doing a frame down to that lower right spot. And so it ended up rotating from the lower right rather than the center. Go ahead and master the regular one first. This is really kind of complicated to figure out, and it'll make your head hurt just to think about, like, okay, really, does that happen? But anyway, trust me, it's a lot of fun, and I cover some of this in my book. But you do have to go down to the same spot every time that you do your slight rotation, and keep rotating off that one flower, if it's a flower or whatever that is in the lower part of the frame. So anyway, then you can also, of course, zoom your lens. So I call this kind of like a slap zoom or whatever, but it's basically just zooming continuously and during one exposure. Again, it depends how fast you zoom. If you zoom really, really fast, then you're going to get like streaks here where you don't even see what's behind that. It would just look like streaks. You couldn't tell that this was stained glass behind here. So this was in a little chapel at Callaway Gardens in Georgia, and we were able to get in there with nobody else, and it was really fun because they had this amazing wall. The entire wall was stained glass behind the altar there, and I knew it was going to be pretty sharp in the center. So that's why, I set it up so that would be in the center there, the cross. And then here we've got just similar idea, with flowers. So I don't do a lot of the zoom thing, but I just threw it in to show you. But I do more of this. So this is panning, of course, and a lot of you may already do some of this as well. When you're set up like to do, let's say, a sunrise or even after a sunset, your eye may not see a whole lot of light, but of course, digital is a sponge and it's going to really pick this up, and just all the pixels are going to gather on that sensor. So if you set up, get the camera level, it really is best to probably be on a tripod. And, I mean, I was using a flashlight in the dark to get all the settings right here. And then all I did was just gently move the across horizontally, like maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches at the most. I didn't go across, radically like you might think. And because there was also, of course, motion and movement with the waves, it just made this really sort of painterly image. So that's something to think about when you're, standing around waiting for a sunrise kind of thing, or a sunset after in the blue hour and even beyond the blue hour, with some of these. So same idea here. This was also horizontal panning, but I actually took the camera off the tripod, I remember for a fact here, and I wanted the feeling of euphoria and joy and whatever that I was feeling this particular day. And so I just sort of moved, instead of going exactly straight across, I just kind of moved up and to the right a little bit. And I may have even gone back the other direction during some of the exposure. So remember, we're just kind of do-si-doing with our cameras here, literally, to create a feeling or an impression. And one of the reasons I chose this spot was that I kind of squinted at this scene and I realized, oh, there's definitely color contrast and tonal contrast going on here. So that's another thing, to think about. If those flowers were all bunched together without much green around them, it might not have been as successful. And then this one, I definitely remember hand holding. So this was, I was in Barbados, actually, in the West Indies, and it was bright sun on the beach, really bright sun. And I used the variable ND filter here so that I could get a super long shutter speed. And when I say super long, it's probably like 8-10 seconds. And what I did during that time was just use broad strokes, going diagonally one direction and then diagonally another direction, just kept doing that. And literally, I mean, I felt like I had a paintbrush in my hands. I was just using the camera sort of as a paintbrush, and then it just abstracted the ocean and the sky to this level. And so if you like this kind of thing, again, great for note cards. You can lay type over something like this or use it as a background slide for another image, and composite two together. This was another one where it's just one single exposure in the whole rainforest, on the Olympic Peninsula. And you guys can try this. You got all those wonderful trees near you. You can just move, but move sort of in a squiggly way, up or down, in the same direction, of course, as the trees. And I also squinted at this scene ahead of time and, tried to pick an area where there was fairly even spacing between the tree trunks. So a lot to kind of preconceive with this or think about based on practicing it multiple times. This was in Texas with the bluebonnets and Paintbrush one spring in the foreground there. That's what those flowers are there. Early morning, nice side lighting on this particular morning. And I didn't just pan vertically straight up and down. Excuse me. I, moved the camera kind of a little bit off kilter, so to speak, as I was going up and also as I was coming down. Sometimes I will go up and down. You don't have to just go one direction. And this is just, close up of what I did in the foreground there. And then, again, with dramatic lighting on these were aspens here in Colorado. And so we got this really amazing light, of course, that just brought out all of the texture and made these trees look really even more three-dimensional. And so just experimenting with moving the camera can be really awesome. All right, now rotating and zooming. So this actually is a technique you could try with a single exposure or multiple exposures. I suggest a small aperture, and all this is in my book it's a very how-to book, to do each of these if you guys are interested. But anyway, so when you see a scene like this, I love it because you've got fairly even distribution of color and you've got little points of color. The yellow flowers are fairly spaced apart. They're a little bunched up there on the right. But anyway, squinting at a scene like this, helps you to see it better. And so anyway, I basically rotated and zoomed, but this is a multiple exposure of rotating and zooming. So small aperture, it's helpful to have a lens collar. If you don't, you can use, I'll show you a way that in a minute, I'll describe how you can do it without necessarily having a collar on your telephoto lens, but you do need to have a zoom telephoto lens. And this was, I think it was something like 9 exposures. So I would suggest, again, on these, try to get like 7 or 9 if you can, or even 5. If you can only do 2 or 3, try that too. I mean, you still get an effect, but ideally something around 7 or 9, I think works really well with this. And so anyway, you might be scratching your head like, what the heck is a rotating and zooming and all this crazy stuff? The way to do this is, it's kind of complicated, but I'll try to show you in just a second. This is another one I thought I would throw in just to make your head hurt even more. Like on this one, I rotated and zoomed, but I didn't do it from the center. Similar to that other one I was talking about, I rotated and zoomed off that PowerPoint, so to speak, in the upper left. There was a flower there, and I just rotated and zoomed each frame off of that one flower there. So you can change wherever you rotate and zoom off of, however you like. So this hopefully will give you a crude way of understanding how to do this. So I'm usually on a tripod, okay? It helps to be on a tripod when you're doing this. And I've got my 70-200, and basically what I'm doing is and I'll play this little movie again, but what I'm doing is putting my left hand on the zoom ring of the lens. So you see that's like the zoom ring. That's not the focus ring, the zoom ring. So I'm just kind of, forming the letter C with my hand and only putting those 2 fingers on that part of the lens. And then I'm keeping it locked in place. And I've also loosened the collar around the lens. Okay, that's important. You got to loosen that collar. And again, I'm going to show you a way to do this without having a collar in just a second. But anyway, so you would hold on to that ring, keep the left hand as still as you can. I mean, I just imagine that like my arm is concrete and it's not moving at all. The camera's going to move, but that arm doesn't move at all. So I've got that left hand there. And then with my right hand, I'm actually rotating the camera around. So if the left hand stays still and the right hand is moving, every time you move in a small increment, it's going to zoom the lens a little bit and it's going to rotate it a little bit. So that's how you kind of get your multiple exposures. So I'll play this again, just so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. I'll play it again. I mean, that left hand is moving slightly, but you really don't want the left hand to move at all. It just stays locked down on there. I'll play it one more time. So see, the right hand is what's doing all the moving. Anyway, now if you don't have a collar, what you can do is still have that same hand position on the left hand, but instead of holding the lens like I am there, actually take your wrist and rest your wrist on top of the tripod. And that can kind of be your lens collar and anchor you there. So if you rest your wrist down on that tripod, that's kind of your lens collar. And then just grasp the zoom part of the lens and, don't let go, don't let it move. And every time you move your right hand, the other hand, it's going to, do the same effect. So anyway, that's just one way to work around it. And hopefully this wasn't like way too confusing. I try to make it clear, but it's hard over Zoom. This was a one in Holland, of course, done that way. And here's another one from Callaway Gardens where I showed you those azaleas. I mean, if you saw in my book, actually, I show you the original scene, but it was just nothing more than like some azaleas with some purple flowers around it and, like some trees in the background. You wouldn't believe that an image like that, would come out of a scene like that, but it's a lot of fun to just play around with. Here's another one that's just kind of wild and wacky. Here's one where I rotated and zoomed off that one sunflower. This was in a lavender field. I found that one flower isolated there, and it had a lot of little yellow, more delicate flowers below it. But by rotating and zooming just off of that one flower, and again, it's like, you put that camera back at that spot every time you do your rotate and zoom. That's kind of how to get that to happen. And then doesn't take much to keep me happy. I can be really entertained with nothing more than a basket of hanging flowers. That's all this was. And I saw this in the street in Crested Butte, Colorado. And I decided to just rotate and zoom off of that one petunia that's up there on the low. It's actually on the edge of the frame there in the upper left. So what I did was reposition this so that that petunia was in the PowerPoint there, and rotated and zoomed off of that one petunia and got this crazy 60s t-shirt. But it's just fun to play around with this stuff. And again, just shoot to make your own heart sing. I can't emphasize that enough. All right, now this one here, all I did was rotate and zoom 5 frames clockwise, and then I rotated and zoomed 5 frames counterclockwise, because I was like, well, what if, I'm always asking what if, how can I, throw another log on the fire, so to speak. So tons of fun trying this kind of thing too. And now, of course, perfect time with flowers beginning to come out and all of that. Now this one, Monet's Garden, again, you recognize the scene from before. This time, what I'm going to do with this scene is just do a single exposure, and I'm going to pan across, but I'm going to kind of do this little up and down squiggly motion as I'm panning across horizontally. And again, it's, shutter speed of like, probably for this one, I would guess, 1/8 of a second at least, maybe even a whole second. But depending on how fast you move it, so you can create all kinds of like abstract images that are fun. And then this one was just a tree where I just kind of did a real quick, small downward jerky motion, and it made the tree kind of look wacky. Now with close-ups, like I said, I have a whole nother lecture all about close-ups, but this is a fun lens. I just thought I'd throw this in to mention it. This is a lens. There's a guy actually making these for me, and it's just a hollow tube, and it's got 3 mirrors inside. So it's called a kaleidoscope as opposed to a kaleidoscope. The kaleidoscope technically has the colorful glass in it, whereas this doesn't have colorful glass. It's just the 3 mirrors. But whatever you point it at, it's going to give you kind of this kaleidoscopic effect. So I do happen to have some of these if anybody's interested. This guy, like I said, is making them for me. It's a 62 millimeter thread size. You could step up or step down to adapt to your camera lens. It'll fit on a telephoto or a macro. It's not so good with a wide angle, but it's great for a telephoto lens or a macro lens. And what I actually like, here it is screwed into the lens. This is my 200 macro. Looks really dorky. But if you want, what I like doing better than this is to hold it out an inch or 2 from the end of the lens. And so it's best, of course, being on a tripod, because that way I can rotate that lens while I'm looking through the viewfinder and get just the right, composition or effect that I want. And I can change, whether it's close or far from the lens, etc. And then, of course, fire the shutter there. So these are just a few images made that way. Yes, you could probably, spend some hours in Photoshop and recreate this sort of idea, but it's just fun, to see in new ways. So here's some that some of my students did. It works well, with things that have pattern to them. That's just an ashtray turned upside down on a table. Or a single flower. It's best to use kind of a medium aperture when you're doing this. If you use, f/16 or something, you're going to see all the lines from the mirrors that are, glued together inside of there. So anyway, just a lot of fun if you guys are interested in that. And then I just thought I'd throw this in a little bit about defocusing. So I'm getting ready to, evaluate a bunch of images you guys did. And to me, it's okay if like an image is not tack, sharp, but with the caveat being, it looks like you meant to do it. I hope you realize in this case, I really intentionally threw that out of focus. So, I don't want to get too philosophical, but there are times in our life where, things are murky. They're not tack sharp. They're cloudy. They're, out of focus. So why not mimic that feeling in our imagery? And so this was all about, just enjoying the light and the play of light and shapes and color and, all of that. I don't care. I lost the fact that really was a flower I was shooting. We must forget the name of the thing we're seeing. Here I defocused the lens and just played around with a bunch of multiple exposures, and I don't like that image at all really, but I just thought I'd put it in just as an idea of what you could try. Here's another one where, this tulip is purposefully defocused. And, in my world, it's okay, to do that. So don't be afraid to just experiment with this stuff. And so that, I think, drives the point home of what I was talking about earlier. Now, if you're interested in trying some of this stuff with a phone, here are a couple of apps. The one on the top is for iPhone. The other one is Android. And everything I've been talking about, with the rotating and zooming, or the tilting up and down with trees or whatever, or panning, and all of this stuff can be done in your phone. So that's incredibly freeing. You don't need a tripod for 99% of these. All of this was handheld. Anyway, same ideas of moving the camera or the phone. And you can combine, in the case of Average Camera Pro, you can combine up to 128 frames in one single image. So with Average Camera Pro, when you're looking that up in the App Store, you might need to type out the word average and even the word camera to get it to come up. But that is the icon that you're looking for, that one there on the top. And then for Android, there's MEC. And then if you want to do some slow shutter stuff, this is another set of apps, the slow shutter cam for the iPhone and slow shutter long exposure camera for the Android. So, and on the image on the left, I was hand holding at sunset. This was in Southern California. And I just kind of rocked the phone back and forth ever so slightly during that exposure. And it, made it kind of look more dreamy and ethereal. And then, of course, on the right, I actually was on a tripod. I have a mount for my phone to be able to put it on a tripod. So you can play with stuff like that. All right. So this is the book I was talking about earlier. I've sold over 1,000 copies of this book. Freeman did the foreword for me, and it was self-published. It's already in its second printing. So I'm really proud of the fact that I've sold that many, and it is still available. So I'll be glad to send one to you all. It's very how-to, step by step. If you go to that website, it gives you a sample chapter and shows you kind of what the book's all about. But it goes through everything I talked about tonight in more depth. And then this is some webinars where if you want to pay 20 bucks or so for, like the one on the left was all about close-ups. The one in the middle was similar to what I just did for you all, but I actually did a live demonstration in that webinar. So you can watch me, move the camera and do different things. And then the one on the right was all about creative smartphone photography. So it's all on the Hunt's Photo Education website. And you might need to look for go under previous courses, and you should see, or just type in my name in the search and it should come up there. So anyway, and then for those of you into the phones, I did these with my wife. We've got a little pamphlet all about 5 shooting apps. It's sort of like a little cheat sheet. You can put this in your camera bag. And so there's one on shooting apps and then another one on editing apps. And those are available if you want to email me for those. So this one actually, there's a whole panel on Snapseed, which is a great, app for basic editing. And then I didn't let you guys know this, but I'm gonna do a drawing, maybe not live tonight, but sometime tomorrow, of somebody can win a free copy of this ebook if you'd like. This is an ebook called Creative Macro Photography. I didn't have time to talk about macro tonight, but anyway, this has got all kinds of stuff in here. Everything from equipment to fundamentals of macro. There's a whole chapter that talks about the fill flash and using setups at home. With COVID, this is great stuff to be able to practice doing stuff like these water drops and whatever at home. So if you're interested in getting a copy of this book, you can send me an email. There's the email address, charles@charlesneedlephoto.com. With the subject line free macro ebook drawing, and then I'll draw a name out tomorrow. Why don't we say like before noon tomorrow, your time? How about that? Does that sound okay, Rachel and Kathy? Okay, so yeah, send the email before noon. And if you don't want to be on my email list, let me know. I don't share my list with anybody else. It's just the periodic emails about workshops and so forth. But I'll add you to my email list as well if you're interested. And then this is just some of the workshops for this year, kind of a lighter schedule for me, but I thought I'd just throw it up here. We probably aren't going to be going to the Butcher Gardens in August, I hate to say. But if you're interested in going there with me next year, definitely send me an email and let me know. And I'll be sure and get you on the notification list when registration opens for that. And then there is a macro conference in South Carolina. There are only 18 spots left for that. If you're interested, I can tell you how to sign up for that. And I've got 2 in Atlanta area that have sold out, but I'd love to do something like that with the West Coast. So maybe you guys, we would talked about maybe doing a private workshop for the club at some point. But that's a lot of fun with glass and Mylar and water drops and all these fun things you could do indoors, even in the winter. It's a great sort of subject to be photographing. So anyway, and then next year, looking ahead to next year, I mentioned Holland. Still got 1 spot left there. And then I'm going to Italy as well. The first one almost sold out in like 2 days. So we decided to add a second session, and that one's half sold out. So if anybody's been dying to go to Tuscany and would like to come with me, we're going to do some gardens and lots of other stuff too, architecture and all the other cultural things there in Italy. And then if you're interested in Monet, I don't know for sure. Like I said, I'm in communication with them. Just have to see how it's going to evolve with COVID, whether they're going to allow us to come in there privately again. But let me know in an email if you're interested in that. And then I am doing something in Wisconsin next summer with Mike Moats and Belmont and Jackie Kramer. I don't know if you guys have heard of those 3 other amazing instructors. And so we're going to do this little photo retreat up in Lake Superior area, Wisconsin. So let me know. And this is how to get in touch with me on social media as well, and love to keep up with all of you. And, I'm here my philosophy is this is not just a one-off lecture. Like I want to, help you grow as a photographer and really just help you to see differently. And even if you like real straight literal photography, trying some of these things, I think will just strengthen that visual muscle. Photography is a performance art, just like dance or music. And the more you practice it, the better you're going to get, of course. So anyway, thank you so much. It's been really fun. I hope I didn't go over too much.
No,
with the
fine.
time.
You're actually
There's a lot to try and cram in there.
Yeah, we have some more questions for you.
Okay, cool.
And I just want to let people know that I actually have Charles' book on creative macro, and it's just encouraging me to go back and read it more thoroughly, because I did not, I have to admit. So I'm excited now. Let's see. The person who said his multiple exposure was grayed out on his D7100 said it was the bracketing. So
good. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that helps other people that might run into that problem. Thank you.
All right. Somebody said Dave said he loved the suggestion of squinting to pre-visualize.
Great. Yeah.
Rachel wants to know, how do you get off-center zoom using the zoom rotate technique?
So, that's hard to answer in like 30 seconds or less, but
you can take your time on it. We're
yeah. So essentially, I mean, I wish we could be in person, but anyway, you set up a scene and you find, like, if this was, a flower bed, let's say, you pick a flower that you want to rotate and zoom off of wherever it happens to be in the frame. And so what I do is I kind of, like, if you were hand holding, it's probably the easiest way to describe doing this. If you were to imagine like that there was a pole coming out of that flower and you're going to like just rotate around that pole, if it was coming out towards you, that's one way to sort of visualize it. Mm-hmm. And you're going to take the camera, and as you spin around, or if you're rotating and zooming, you would zoom a little bit and rotate a little bit each time. You're going to keep the point in your viewfinder locked on to where the end of that pole is, so to speak, or where that flower is. So you're kind of rotating and zooming off of that one flower. or that one thing that's fixed in the scene. So you basically marry a point in the viewfinder with a point in the scene is kind of the quick and dirty answer. I wish I could just like show you. Anyway, did that help a little bit?
So my question, you're not on the tripod then, you're not locked into the center rotational point.
You can be on a tripod, but it is so cumbersome because you have to
Okay.
loosen the tripod every time and then retighten it. And yeah,
Okay.
so it's probably better not to be on
All
the
right.
tripod. But like I said, use your wrist and just rest your wrist on the top of the tripod. If you want to have some stability, you know, and then just hold on to that zoom part of the lens and rotate with the other hand.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
And Brian said, if it's on a collar, it would be rotating around the center.
Right. It would. Yes. By default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's see, I'm not sure. George, you said something about cropping and post-processing. So I'm guessing, do you crop, Charles?
Sometimes, but I try to stay true to what I did in camera, I guess just because I was trained in the film days. I rarely, but it might have been that image I showed where I was saying it's not cropped, you know, of those paintbrush. That might be what he was referring to there.
Mhm. Let's see, Jim says, what about using tubes for macro photography rather than a macro lens?
You certainly can. Yep. And I do have a set of like 3 extension tubes. There's nothing wrong at all with experimenting with tubes. One of the things, of course, to keep in mind is you lose a little bit of light that way. So, you know, you have to adjust your exposure, and it, you know, in theory is degrading the quality slightly of your image, you know, the further you move the lens away from the sensor. But it achieves a similar sort of magnification. But I like that close-up lens because it's a real high quality, like dual element glass where you're not losing light and you still can maintain the quality and get great magnification. So, and that achromatic lens I mentioned is a really good substitute for the Canon 500D, because I'm not sure you can find that 500D easily anymore.
You know, going way back to the beginning, you were talking about cameras that allowed you to do multiple exposure in the camera.
Right.
And, I have a Sony 7R3, and I don't think Sony will allow you to do that in those 7R3s. They used to
Maybe
do
not.
it in the image, the software that they gave out, but right inside the camera, you can't do it.
Okay. Yeah, that could be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but we
But
have
use the script, you know, if you
Yeah.
want to do it that way.
we have a few people who have the new Sony A1, and I don't know if they tried that yet. No, okay.
Yeah, I saw a few hands go up in the beginning. I'd be curious. It's hard to take a poll, but like,
Right.
how many people have played around with this feature a little bit? Like, yeah, okay. It's hard to tell how many have raised their hands, but anyway.
Yeah, we can let's see. Gallery view. Okay, raise your hands and we can count here. We've got 2.
Yeah, a few. Okay.
So far, 3, 4.
Well, hopefully this inspired you to like keep
Yeah.
playing around more with it, or at least discover it for the first time even.
Yeah, I think so. Donna says she has a copy of Freeman Patterson's book, Photography and the Art of Seeing. She bought it years ago, and she still refers to it. It's very instructive.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's a classic. So like I said, check that out. And he's got, I don't know, at least 10 other books. Really great. He's a prolific writer, and he explains why a photo works visually better than anybody I know.
Wow.
So
Let's see. Yolanda wants to know, can you deconstruct the overlays in the camera also?
unfortunately, well, so with the Canon, it allows you to shoot what they call the source images and keep those source images. So the answer, I guess, would be yes with certain cameras, but with mine, you can't save each of the individual frames that it used. So shooting it both ways, you know, might be the best option. One way to combine manually using the script, and another way automated with the phone or the camera.
Cool. All right, any other questions for Charles? I think we have covered it.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so much.
so much. It's so
Yeah, and don't forget the
inspirational.
drawing, everyone. We could
Yeah.
during the break if you want to send an email or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I love straight literal photography too. Don't get me wrong. You know, I mean, but this is just fun as another way to kind of take your work to the next level. And if you feel like you're in a rut, particularly.
Well,
So
this is something a lot of people can do if they have flowers in their backyard or,
sure, trees, any
yeah,
even, you know, I've seen like intentional camera movement with colorful scarves in somebody's closet, you know, so like anything. It really doesn't have to be natural subjects.
perfect. Well, this has been very inspirational. Thank you
Well,
so
good,
much.
good.
And Rachel, I think we're back to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Charles. Our club
Sure.
seeks to have inspiration and education, and I think you hit both of those tonight.
Well, good. Thank you for having
Well
me.
done.
It's
Well
awesome.
done. Something new for me to try. I always appreciate that.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a break, folks. It's 7:25. We're doing great on time tonight. So let's do 10
Okay.
minutes, start back at 7:35. When we come back, then I'll announce the winners of the category winners for May, and then we will start on the critique. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Great.
See you guys
Awesome.
with you.
Okay, let me,
And I'll leave this open. People want to visit or whatever. So.
You want to pull yourself closer or anything?
Oh, I got it.
All right,
I'm good.
all right.
I'm good. I'm good.
Let's see. Tom says, not taking art to the next level, perhaps a different level. Okay. Yeah, I can, Laura. Let's see. Let me get Charles' email address for Laura. Everybody. All right. Let's see. All right.
Hey, Bill. Where did you find the tiger lilies up at the Sierra Discovery?
Bill's not answering that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that meadow kind of out in the back towards where that big structure is, where the waterways are.
Oh, like a flume?
Yeah, that flume. So I just went out, and went counterclockwise on the trail.
Mm-hmm.
You'll kind of come down and you'll see a big meadow out there.
Yeah, Bear Valley.
You have to walk out to the right. There's another path that takes you out there, and they're starting to bloom out there. And I guess they're like little wild daisies as well. And so looks like they're just starting. I mean, I found quite a few, and so, but no, it was a lot of fun. I was out there chasing around the butterflies, and they're landing on the little flowers and stuff, and they got some good shots. So,
Oh, cool. We're going tomorrow morning.
oh, out there.
Yeah, out to Sierra Discovery, and then we're gonna let Finley play in Fuller Lake.
Oh, cool. All right.
So I'll have him grab the tripod legs and see if we can try some of these techniques.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, it's called doggy assist.
Yes, it is. Yeah, he does great. He does assist a lot. So anyway, it looks like Brian's back. How was your float trip?
It was great. Low water, but good weather except for 2 cold days.
Did Arlo miss you?
He did, I think.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Wow.
Yeah.
I can hardly stand 2 hours away from my pup.
Yeah. It was hard.
He did doggy day camp today, and he got so me and Linda got to go to Tofanelli's for brunch, which was nice.
Nice. Okay, folks, well, we will get started here. 7:36.
Is
All right.
Is Ellen here? Yes, she is.
Are her name.
Yeah, Ellen, you want to unmute?
Case.
Here I am, and let's, come on. Oh, that would, okay.
Hey,
There she is.
we need her. Yeah. Hi. So welcome, Ellen.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. So I'm going to start by sharing the last month's critique, the year people voted, and the category winners for the month of May. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen with you guys. Okay, let me get this out of the way. Timer, what is going on? Zoom quit unexpectedly. Can you all see that?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Can you see all this?
Yeah.
Now we can, yes.
That is not a happy message.
Oh, hello. Zoom.
But it's
Um,
working or we wouldn't see it.
Is she back yet? No, she's not. All right. Oh, she is. Her mic is off.
All right, can you see my shared screen or not? I'm guessing.
No,
Okay, so
we
let's try
see you.
share screen. Come on, Zoom. You can do it. Now, can you see the shared screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So this is the month of May, voted as best of each of our categories. So starting with our first one, best assigned subject is She Who Serves by Kathy Triolo. Next, this is Best of Abstract. This is Rock Art by Janice Rosner. Next one is Best of Architecture. This is One Window at Empire Mine by Ingrid Lockhart. Next, Best of Fauna. This is Nemo's Friends, Papua New Guinea by Mark Davis. This is Best of Flora, Coleus by Michael Quinn. Best Natural Landscape. This is Pfeiffer Beach, Big Sur by me, Rachel Rosenthal.
Who?
Yeah, really, who? Best Night Photography. This is the Pleiades, Dalton Highway, Alaska by Fred Finney. Best People. This is It Is a Big World Out There by Tom Quinn. Best Photojournalism. I don't see any animals out there, do you? By Bernadette Sylvester. Best Travel. This is Along the Waterfront, Shanghai by me, Rachel Rosenthal. This is next category, Best of Creative Fantasy, Anything Goes. This is titled Midnight Rendezvous by Dave McClellan. Best Manipulated but Realistic is entitled One Flower by Ingrid Lockhart. Best Black and White Other is titled Skyrock and the High Sierra by Chris Schiller. And our final category of the night is Best Color, is entitled Ornaments by Mike Shea. So congratulations to all the winners. Well done. And now it's time to see the June submittals, and I will stop sharing my screen.
And I will, thank you, Rachel.
Turn it over to Kathy. All right.
And I will share my screen. So I just want to make sure, Charles, are you back?
I am.
Excellent. So we have both Ellen and Charles. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to share my screen, and I have to make sure I have the right thing open here. So give me a mo, as they say. And hello, why aren't they doing that? Okay. And let's see if this will work. Here we go. Share. All right. What do you see the assigned subject title slide?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So we're going to start with assigned subject, close focus and macro. And this is not working. Okay, let's see if that works. Does that work? Hold on, we'll work this out. A moment for, there we go. Okay. Daffodil swirl.
Great. So I'm doing this category, I guess. So love this close up, of course. I can't tell whether this was maybe just an in-camera movement or maybe the use of like a liquefy filter, but it's really cool, really neat effect. You might consider rotating this, since it is very abstract, like 180 degrees, so that we have kind of the darker tones that are at the top at the bottom of the frame. And so I don't know, it may or may not look better that way, but anyway, really cool idea. I love this.
All right. Rose Dew, D-E-W.
Really nice close focus here. Really hard to focus this close a lot of times. And I like the one drop, of course, on there, and really is isolated by having, you know, different colors behind it. And so I think it's a nice tight image. You could consider like cropping it even more so that it's like even more abstract, so that we don't even have like the left edge or the top edge in the frame. I can't really show you what I'm seeing here, but anyway, I think you get the idea if you were to do a little bit tighter focus on there, or crop, I mean.
Let me just go back to the last one. I'm sorry, Anne, I did not say your name.
Ah,
The maker is Ann Westling on that one. And on this one, the maker is Gary Kartstaffner. And now we can legitimately move on. This one is Dewdrops on Edges.
so I still struggle with trying to be successful doing this kind of shot. This is really well done. Bravo. It's so hard, to get every drop that's got, something in it that's easy to recognize or understand what's inside the drop, and getting just the right amount of depth of field. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. And it's nicely composed, just the right amount of negative space there on the left. And so really, really nicely done. And you even got a little bit of detail in that top drop there coming through.
And the maker is George Pelpel.
Nice.
This is Buzzing Bees in Peonies.
So this is really great, the way you frame this and come in close. One thing to think about, of course, this would scare the bee off. If you had like a diffuser, it would soften the light, and make it even softer and a little more pleasing lighting here maybe. But and then of course, in a perfect world, that bee is like, I can't tell if he's got our back to us or anyway, you can't spin that bee around, obviously, but it's just, waiting a lot of times to get the right shot. But it's really awesome that you caught that and just the right shutter speed. It's all about shutter speed, when you're trying to do something like this. But you might want to just try to do stuff like this on bright overcast days, or look for flowers in the shade, but of course the bees are drawn to the sun and all that, so it's art.
And the maker is Larry Leffman.
Great.
This is called Lily Glow.
Yeah, so this has a real nice glow, ethereal effect to it. You may want to darken that lower right corner. My eye keeps sort of being drawn down to that bright area. Anytime you have bright tones or tones that are brighter than the rest of the image, well, those aren't brighter than the rest of the image, but they are bright. It can pull your eye out of the frame. So I always like to just doing a vignette there, a little more vignetting. Or of course you could, use your healing tool and heal that if you wanted to. But amazing light coming through that flower, and just beautiful, like nicely framed too. I like the composition.
And the maker is Janice Rossner. This is called Thomas.
Really cool. To get this kind of magnification is great. And we see lots of detail, of course, that you can't really always see with the naked eye on a dollar. I guess this is a bill of some kind. Anyway, or maybe it's an illustration, but it's nice that it's really, really close and super close up. So I like it.
The maker is Daniel Chaplin. This is Cactus Flower Caravaggio style.
Oh, yes. So Caravaggio, those of you who don't know, I think if I'm not mistaken, did all kinds of almost like chiaroscuro lighting, like, some of it's real dark. Anyway, I like the dark shadow in the background, really helps the flower to pop. And again, doing a diffuser here or bright overcast light would maybe even soften this even more, but maybe you wanted that harsh lighting on it kind of. But nice little specular highlights, and you might consider doing something with the brown stalks up there in the upper right, just making that a solid black background.
The maker is Jeff Alstatter. This is Macro Sunflower, Pacifica, California.
So even though this is bullseyed or dead center, I think it works really well and it's really effective. It reminds me of a mandala or mandala, just really nice to come in on a flower like this and, be dead center. Doesn't always have to be off center. So, and there's great detail in the shadows and all the highlights, and I think it's nicely composed and well exposed and all of that. So right amount of depth of field as well.
And the maker is Shelby Cohen. This is Costa Rican frog.
this is really amazing, very high impact, of course, and awesome lighting. I would assume this was in a kind of a studio sort of setting, but nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, the colors are very complementary and just the right pose, and those eyes are just amazing. And so, yeah, and I like the way it's composed with those little bit of the red flower on the left there, and everything about it's just really awesome. And of course, with all critters, you want to try and get the eyes as sharp as you can, which is well done here.
The maker is Bernadette Sylvester, and that ends assigned subject. Now we're doing abstract, and the first image is, For Some Reason, I'm Hungry.
Great title. Yeah, so this is really very creative, very clever. Love the idea of arranging all of this cutlery this way. Makes me want to play around with stuff in the kitchen, and it's just well done. Very nice. You could pan to the right slightly if you wanted. It's a little close there on that right edge, the far right edge. I'd like to see a little bit more of some of those gold handles. But other than that, it's just really cool and really nice composition. So great idea. And I see you, the maker, in every spoon, I think.
And that person I think we're seeing is Rachel Rosenthal.
Ah, Rachel, great.
This is Dr. Seuss meets Monet.
Yeah, so we were talking about, images that give you an impression or a feeling. This definitely has a feeling to it. I think that for this, I think it's nice that the way the tree is reflected in here and all of that. You could experiment with adding a touch more clarity or sharpness to it. It's one of those that sort of teeters on the edge of like being sharp and not sharp, but I'm pretty sure you intended it to all be sort of blurry. The red line there underneath the two orange leaves, I guess those are leaves, is a little bit distracting to me. So I would maybe consider removing that, but nicely seen. And you could vignette the four corners as well to add impact and maybe even add a touch of contrast if you wanted to.
And the maker is Brian Dunbar. This is ice mimicking leaf and reflecting golden foliage.
This is beautiful. Yeah, amazing. It almost looks like, well, it is, I guess it's a reflection, but it reminds me of ice for sure. And just the patterns and the textures and we don't know exactly what it is, but that's the whole point of abstract, right? So, and nice complementary colors, the blue and the yellow, and just the way all of the various lines are going. And one thing Freeman actually taught me, he heard me do a critique once, and he said, how many diagonal lines are there in an image? And basically he said there are only two, and they go corner to corner. He said all of the rest of the lines are referred to as oblique lines. So that's just a technicality. Remember I said he's the master at visual design and explaining why an image works and whatever. So think of those as oblique lines, a lot of those oblique lines in this image. It works well though.
Let me go back for a minute. And the maker of this is Tom Quinn. Now we are seeing Garage Door, Spring Street.
Very cool. I like, of course, it looks like it could even be tree bark, but I guess it's peeling paint. It's really nicely composed. Even with images like this, you do have to think about your composition. You can't just walk up and grab a shot, so to speak. So it looks like it was carefully composed, and I like, the different colors and shapes, and it's well done.
And the maker is Mike Shea. This is titled Raindrops.
So here, of course, your eye is always going to go like to the sharpest and the brightest points in an image. And for me, my eye went right down to those sharp droplets in the lower right, which is probably what the maker intended. So that's good. You could consider making the entire thing sharp if you wanted, using a lot more depth of field. You might even have to focus stack in this case. But I think it's effective this way as well. And it's a nice composition, just the yellow surrounding the other colors there. And so, yeah, but it would be interesting to see. A lot of times when I'm doing close-ups, I'll bracket apertures, shoot it at several different apertures because you might end up liking one better than another. So.
Okay, and the maker is June Anderson. This is titled Underwater Rocks.
So yeah, never would have guessed this was underwater, and it doesn't matter, but it's great to be able to capture something like this. And I would like to see, in this case, I think a little bit more sharpness throughout, because it really is, it looks like the maker intended it all to be a little, or all of it to be sharp, or it could be sharper. So you could maybe even apply sharpening in the post-processing on, especially that blue portion there, but it's because it's in the water. I get that, but just using a little bit more depth of field, having a little smaller aperture maybe would help do that. And if there's water moving across it, you might have to use a really fast shutter speed to be able to get it better. So anyway, but it's nicely composed.
And the maker is June Anderson. And this is titled Abstract Oil and Water with Faces.
Yeah, so this is really cool. It's hard to tell what it is, but it's really cool that there are faces in this. And I think it's some kind of fabric maybe, or it's a carpet with shadows on a carpet. I don't know. It doesn't matter again, but very cool. And it's nicely seen. And yeah, the upper left, there's a little slither of white. You could easily clone that. I'm being super picky now, but anything that's bright on those edges sometimes can pull your eye out. But if you're putting it in a frame, hey, that will get blocked anyway, so you don't have to worry. But yeah, really cool idea. I'm assuming that's what that was. I'd be very curious to know if it is shadows on carpet.
Well, the title is Abstract Oil and Water, so we'll have
okay,
to
maybe
find
not.
out from the maker, who
Yeah.
is Jeff Alstadter. And that completes abstract. And now we are into architecture. And the first image is Panes of Light.
So if the light is actually one of the first things that I responded to in this image, it's a really nice, soft, pleasing light, just lights up that greenhouse. And it just really makes it feel like a warm and inviting space. It's like I like the detail of the bottles that creates nice repetition of different shapes. I think it's interesting to see like through the semi-opaque panels, so you can kind of get a sense of the inside and the outside, at the same time. The orange bucket, it's a little bit of an eye pull, but it also kind of fits within the color palette. And there's a lot of strong vertical lines in the image. One thing I wish the photographer had just tilted the camera back just a little bit to make the vertical lines straighter, and then maybe shifted a little right to include the corner of the window.
Okay. And the maker is Lori Woodhall. This is Alley in Tennessee.
All right, so I'm a big fan of like gritty alleyways, and and I think this image does an excellent job of like showing the layers of graffiti and stickers, and shows something of like like the history and personality of this alleyway, like boring factions of graffiti artists. But the lighting is very diffused and even, and so a lot of the contrast comes from like the colors, between the warm and the cool. Composition follows the rule of thirds, and it's very geometric. And I kind of wish the photographer had also made the verticals just a little bit straighter and really emphasized more of the geometry of the image. But yeah, no, very cool image.
And the maker is Brian Dunbar. This next image is titled Fort Point.
So this is an interesting play on this classic architectural perspective. It's like got the repetition of the arches that fade into the background, draw the viewer back, but there are these little arrows in there, and so it kind of asks the arrow in the far back. It kind of makes the viewer like wonder, like what's back there, what's what's happening there. What I find interesting is that there's a big black. You've got this wall, and it creates this And then the left edge of the image, it's the arrow, it's very tight up against the edge, and it kind of creates this visual tension that's a little uncomfortable, but I kind of like that because it's got this dark, heavy area that balances out with the bright, and you see the arrow, and it's drawing you in.
And the maker is Patricia Leviton. And that ends our architecture category. Now we start the fauna category. This is called Wild Mustangs.
So the very first thing I noticed about this was just that beautiful line of the curve of the neck on the horse on the right-hand side. It actually fits into pretty well into the golden ratio. And then both those horses actually fit into the golden ratio really quite well. So this kind of keeps the eye roving around the composition. And so there's some really great points of separation, like the jawline around the horses. The background is soft and focused, so that really keeps the horses in focus. I also like that the heads of the horses, they form an arc shape. And so I think this composition also kind of underlines the emotion that you kind of feel between these two horses, friendship or love, or something else. And only tiny nitpick is the mane at the top. It goes off the edge a little bit, but that's pretty easy to fix out.
And the maker is Daniel Chaplin. This is Gecko Heaven.
So this is a really strong combination of bold colors and geometric shapes, and it's really very effective. I mean, your eye goes like right to the gecko, and then it kind of like stays, there's a nice catch light in the gecko's eye. He's appropriate, the sharpness is along the gecko. There's a nice catch light in his eye. The only thing I might tweak and play with is the bright corner in the background. I might want to try and bring that down, maybe get rid of some of the white along the edges. Just play with it and see how that works with the image and how it can change it.
And the maker is Lucy Tatro. This is Hummingbird's Dance.
So I really love these colors. I mean, they're very strong, they're very pretty, and this is an excellent example, of the warm, cool contrast of red and green. It's a little bit softer. It's a bit softer than the previous image, but it works really well with the subject matter. Because there's more. The lines are very organic. It feels like very spring, pleasant spring day. And I like the composition of the plants. They provide a nice frame, and then it's like the photographer framed it and then waited for something to happen, and then these hummingbirds came along, and these hummingbirds are just spectacular. They're both in very sharp focus, and the wings, the position, it's like they have the light coming through, and then they just, between them and the plant, they create a nice flowing composition.
And the maker is Jonathan Beth. This is Horseplay.
So the energy of this image is really engaging, and what really makes this image for me is just that little side eye that the horse on the left is giving. I mean, that creates, an emotion and tension, and you kind of feel like they're playing, but it also feels like this is like a moment before, they're going to really start roughhousing. I think that's kind of an interesting tension rather than like the full action there. So what I might do to change, so I would actually want the head of the horse feels a little dark. I might want to brighten that up a bit, and then maybe darken the background around it just a little bit, just to emphasize, bring that out just a little bit more. But very cool horse image.
Okay. The maker is Bill Wages. And this is Dining at Washoe Lake.
So this has a lot of the kind of the classic elements, the landscape foreground, middle ground, and background. And so you have a really good context of like what's going on. And I like that all the horses are facing into the frame, which kind of makes them feel like a unit, and it keeps the eye in the frame. There's a break in the trees, and that kind of helps connect the foreground and the background. The lighting is nice, soft and even, and the colors are nice, but would maybe give it just a touch of warmth, just to kind of bring out the colors of the coats of the horses. And I would also suggest maybe giving it a square crop. Cut a little off the bottom, cut a little off the top, cut a little off that right edge, and give it a square crop, and to, bring in a little more, I think it would make it a stronger composition.
And the maker is Ray Lurkey. This is Fancy Dance.
So I really like the minimalism of this image. I mean, how the color palette is small, and the only context of the bird's environment are these branches, but it emphasizes all these organic lines of the bird, the branches. And it kind of reminds me of like a Japanese scroll painting. There are a lot of rules to composition, but one is to watch your corners and edges, but another is also learn how to break the rules. But I think this works for me, because all the corners, points, all of them are white, but then you've got these organic shapes again that mimic, the birds, and it just gives it the right balance. If I tried taking away one of the branches, it just didn't quite look right. Some of the edges around the branches are a little hazy, and you might want to clean those up, but otherwise, excellent image.
And this image was made by Ann Wessling. This is Close Enough.
So I'm not entirely sure what the title meant. I had more questions than answers, but regardless, I think this is a wonderful image. The blue bokeh in the background, it gives a little bit of context, but it leaves the pelican as the star. And there's a nice color contrast with the bright red and yellow in the pelican's beak, and on the warm brown feathers with the cool blue background. There's really good focus, nice and sharp where it counts. And I like there's a little softness at the far wing to show a little bit of movement. And this particular angle is really interesting because there's organic and geometric lines, and just the angle of that wing, it just kind of reminds me like maybe like Picasso would do if he were to paint, or if he had painted a pelican. Love the detail of the bird's feet and how he holds them in flight. Nice work.
And the maker is Kathy Triolo, and that ends the fauna category. Now we start flora. And our first image is The Pasture.
So this is very much in the same vein of what I was talking about tonight. Love the intentional camera movement here, and just the soft sort of pastel color palette, and a feeling of just lightness, and it's very well done. And I like the fact that it's kind of a low contrast image too. You don't necessarily need to have a whole lot of contrast. And really the contrast is coming more from the colors than it is anything else. So very well done.
And the maker is Janice Rossner. This next image is Hawaii Tropical Unicorn.
So this is a nice sort of portrait, I guess you could say, almost of this plant. And it's nice that the background doesn't have a whole lot of bright, distracting elements to it. You could consider a vertical crop, bringing the sides in just a little bit, and it would still be strong, and maybe even rotating. Sometimes, when you have the subject being parallel to the edge of the frame, it can just kind of look a little static. So just taking the entire image and just sort of rotating it a little bit might add a little more interest, and then cropping that way so that the plant's a little more on a oblique angle, but really nice, sharp, nice lighting, all of that. So unusual plant too. Very cool.
And the maker is Lucy Tetro. And the next image is Peony.
So really strong composition here. Love how the frame is filled, and the just that streak of light coming across at the top adds a whole lot of drama to it. And we don't have a huge color palette here, but it works really well. Just having kind of the red and the pink contrasting, and just nice use of depth of field and all of that. We don't necessarily need to see every bit of it sharp. You could experiment with sharpening the lower left corner and the upper left corner, but I think our eye stays in it more by having that area where the center is sharp, which it is, and the bright light on it. So
Okay, and this maker is Ingrid Lockhart. This is Native Peony a la O'Keeffe.
Yeah, so dramatic light here. I can't tell if this was indoors or, low light situation outdoors. And of course, the light is it's all about the light, of course, in this one. And having the edges dark is okay. It makes the subject stand out, of course. And we also have a nice amount of depth of field here. You might consider, even though the plant maybe not have grown this way, turning this so that it's more of a vertical. I don't know if that's going to make it better or worse or whatever, but it's always fun, when these are a little more abstract, to experiment with rotating around just to see. But it's nice. It's soft light, and I think it's well done.
And the maker is Eric Engels. This is Dogwood Flight.
So really nice light on this. This appears to be in sort of indoors, or at least a window light. And love just isolating plants like this against a dark background. And it's just really nice. You could experiment with a little, if you had to do it over again, using a little bit of fill flash just to get rid of like that one shadow on the dogwood there. I love the shadows on the leaves, but just that one shadow maybe. And so, yeah, but it's nicely composed, and it's just beautiful light. So.
And the maker is Chris Schiller. And now we are in natural landscape. The first image is Ponderosa Sunset.
So what I found interesting about this image is the clouds down by the horizon. They seem to have like a little bit of an optical illusion. It's both like you're looking back down into the Sacramento Valley or something, and it's filled with fog, but it also, it's, clearly you're looking kind of up to it. But I think it's really interesting to have a vertical orientation for a sunset image, and you're not even the light is oblique to the sunset, but it really gives the ponderosa pines a nice pop of color, and those vertical lines are really nice and strong. And then there's a lot of horizontal lines in the clouds and the branches and the landscape that also kind of break that up, and so it gives it a bit of flow. And then the colors are nice, have a nice contrast between the warm and the cool, and then there's a lot of great textural contrast as well.
And the maker is Jim Bear. This is Redwood's sun casting beams of light through fog.
So this is another lovely study, like in lines and mood, and using the light to advantage. It just feels magical and mysterious. Dark, heavy vertical lines of the trees are nicely contrasted with this bright diagonal or oblique beams cutting through the fog, and it just gives it a quiet movement and energy. And the soft, muted color palette works really well with the softness of the image. It's an easy thing to fix, but there's a white line on the right hand side, and you cut that up, and then you might want to bring down the brightness of that upper right hand corner just a little bit to really kind of keep the eye more into the frame.
And the maker is Henry Goodman. This next image is Aspens, Vail, Colorado.
I really love those soft wavy blue lines of the shadows on the snow, and they give a really strong graphic element to the image, and it's very striking. The verticals are also very strong, and then they give a nice contrast to those lines. The scene is sharp all the way through. I think that's fine, and if the background was blurred, I think that would also work. So I think there's a couple different ways you could approach the cropping. I think it's fine as is, but you could also experiment with cropping it to the tree in the right-hand frame, or just giving it a square crop, keeping that tree at the 1/3 mark, keeping it there, but you cut off the trees on the other side, and then it just really lets those lines on the bottom shine. And I'd also, if you can, get rid of the branches poking out of the snow.
And the maker is Fred Finney. This next image is Grass Valley Sunset.
And that is a spectacular sky. And it's like, I'm a big fan of jewel tones, and these colors just really hit the mark for me in that regard. Because that, this beautiful blue that contrasts with the warm red, reddish orange gold tones. And I think it was smart to leave a little bit of detail down in the bottom in the silhouette. You can see some of the lights of the city down there. The only thing I might do is I'd crop a little bit off the left-hand side, maybe, as far, because it doesn't really add too much to the image. Maybe just as far as where the blue comes to the left, and then that would also make those trees that are poking up, it would put them on the 1/3 mark. But that's about all I would do to it.
And the maker is Larry Leffman. This next image is the moon rising at sunset.
Okay, so full disclosure, this is my image. What works for me about this is the fading light on the mountains, the color contrast between the warm and the cool, the contrast of the rough texture of the mountains and the smooth gradient of the sky, the repetition of the peaks, and that the alignment of the moon creates another peak. The bottom half is warm, heavy. You can feel the weight of the mountains, and that's contrasted with the lightness of the sky and the moon. The square crop is a little bit psychologically uncomfortable, but it accentuates the metaphorical lightness of the moon rising. Leaving a little room on the edges makes it feel more comfortable, and it lacks the tension of the square crop, and it might be the better image. I still haven't decided that yet. So.
And the maker is, ta-ta, Ellen Davis. This is Mobius Sunrise.
All right, so this is a heavily photographed rock feature in the Alabama hills, and kudos to the photographer for kind of keeping it fresh and interesting. The perspective is a little different than what I've usually seen. There's heavy visual weight, and on the bottom, and then there's the smooth curve of the rock, and then that's contrasted and balanced by that enormous sunburst that it's just bright light and gives movement and life to the image. And I like that it just takes the background and it creates a relationship with the foreground. And it's a really nice, it's a nicely done starburst. Let's see. The only thing I might get changed is to make the gradient at the top a little more gradual, and then maybe give a little bit more, make it a little bit rounder on the right hand corner to match the rock.
Let me go back.
Sorry.
All right, and the maker is John Sievert. This is Lazing Along the South Yuba.
So this is one that gave me pause because it looked very painterly, and I wondered if it almost belonged in the creative category. But the more I studied, the more I realized it really is just the way it was photographed and edited. They made a very effective use of long exposure to achieve those beautiful flowing lines, and that really makes this image work for me. It draws the eye through the image, and it gives a textural contrast between the soft curves of the water and the hard planes of the rock. Seeing a sharp all the way through, and this works for this image because there is good separation between the elements of this image with the use of the light. The highlights and the shadows are nicely done. The color palette is soft and muted. It makes it feel like serenity, very serene. The only little tiny nitpicky details on the far right-hand corner and about the middle of the edge, and there's a little bit of little bright spot there, but easy to clone out, or if you frame it, there it's gone. Very nice.
And the maker is Rachel Rosenthal. And this ends natural landscape, and we are now entering night photography. This image is Alabama Hills Nightscape.
Oh, there it is. All right, so I really didn't find much to criticize about this gorgeous image. It's very well planned, very well executed. The brightest point of the galaxy, kind of falls on the rule of thirds, and it has this really nice arc that draws the eye around the image, and then it drops it down to the rocks, and then that kind of keeps it drawing through. And I really liked you've got the speckles of all the stars, and then that the speckles that's kind of repeated in the speckles of the granite in the foreground. There's a nice little leading line in the lower right-hand corner. And then I don't feel one dominates the other, and it's a very nicely balanced image.
And the maker is Rick Eshelman. And that ends night photography. This category is people, and this image is titled Treehouse Preschool 2017, San Francisco.
So this is a really nice portrait. Love the shallow depth of field. The expression is just perfect. And yeah, the only thing that's pulling my eye out a little bit is on the right-hand edge there. You can see the white little highlights, but very minor to either darken those down or possibly clone them out. But just beautiful soft light, and just the color of his eyes and the color of the shirt, it all works together. So nicely done.
And the maker is Shelby Cohen. This is Village Woman, Tunisia.
Really also an amazing portrait. It's nice to see a little bit of catchlight in the eyes and real tight framing. An image like this, it just screams for tight framing. So really good job, and leaving just enough space kind of to the right of her face. You could have maybe used a touch more space, but I don't know if there was something there that would have ended up in the frame, but that's being really picky. I love just the flow of the on the left, the white veil or whatever she's wearing there, and just really nice. And and it's often, effective if the subject's not always necessarily looking right into the camera. So well done.
And the maker is Ed Sylvester, and that ends the people category. We are now in travel. And this is called Star Wars Filming Site, Tunisian Desert Panorama.
Awesome. If you're able to get here, I don't know if this is open to the public or not, but really a great place to shoot. Yeah, it's a nice that you did a panorama here. I think it's really effective. Of course, you could play around later on if you wanted in the post-processing to take it into a whole nother realm by, replacing the sky with something really cool and interesting. But it's well composed as a panorama. The upper right corner, there's a little bit of bright light there. You could either, darken that down or maybe clone. But I don't think I'd crop down, because then we'd lose, what's in the center of the frame there. So, but yeah, it's great. What an awesome place to shoot.
And the maker is Ed Sylvester, and I'm assuming Bernadette is in the middle there. This is
Okay.
Truckee Balloons.
So really like the repetition of the horizontal lines here with the landscape. And then of course, it breaks the pattern by having the two balloons there, and really high contrast. Your eye goes right to that area of high contrast. And I like that it sort of falls on the third. I think it's well exposed, and then, like the subtlety of all the lines above it. So I can't think of anything else really that I would do to improve that. It's nice.
And the maker is Dave McClellan. And we finished with travel. Now we're doing creative category. This is Albert talking to Amy.
Really effective use of, I guess there are mirrors here involved, but it's great seeing. And it really makes you do a double take, of course. And just seeing that hand in the left-hand frame is what really makes it. So really nice seeing and very creative. And it's also worth noting the red napkins, and how that one on the left really sort of draws your eye in as a leading line. And the hand gestures on the left, just everything about it, and the way each person's looking, it almost looks like it was staged, but it probably wasn't.
And the maker is Ellen Davis. We'll have to talk to you later about that one. This is Dessert Fantasy.
So yeah, the title kind of fits what it is, and we've got all kinds of desserts here. And having the reverse vignetting on an image like this is, I think, effective. Makes it even more inviting. I think if those corners have been dark, it might not have been so light and inviting. And just having the the white porcelain and just kind of the high key sort of thing going on. Some of the shadows it's a little high contrast, so you might reduce the contrast just a little bit if you wanted to, and play around with getting a little more detail in some of the shadows. But it's a fun image.
And the maker is Patricia Leviton. This is a new friend at Buena Vista Gardens.
So yeah, very whimsical, of course, and fun to, I mean, it really does look like a person there, and adding the facial features and just the dramatic lighting and having the darker background really helps the subject pop. And again, this is one where I think it works fine to have it dead center or in the middle, and just really a whimsical, fun image, and a great color too in the plant.
And the maker is Kathy Triolo.
Ah.
And this is Long Ride Home.
Yeah, so really cool to merge these two together. I'm assuming it might be a composite, but maybe not. Yeah, just having the strong color in the outfits of the cyclists, and that just riding sort of into nowhere, very symbolic image, of course, and could probably be used for many ad campaigns if you want to make a lot of money off this image. But yeah, very nice, nicely done, very creative.
And the maker is Dave McClellan. And that ends Creative Fantasy. And now we are in Manipulated but Realistic. The first image is Rock Art at the Beach.
So rock carns, it's like they make really interesting subjects, and they're sculptural, and they're just something. They're really just, yeah, they really get you. But I like that, it's like you've got one right in the foreground that the reader, the viewer can connect with, and then they've got these repeating shapes in the background that kind of draws you into it and acts as a leading line into the image. And cairns, they are often used as trail markers, so I thought that was very cute. What I think would help really improve this image is so to have more separation between the rock cairns and the background and the area, because they do, you can see them, but they do tend to get a little bit lost. So maybe you can blur the background a little bit, or a different perspective, or change of light. So.
Okay. The maker is Gary Kartstaffner. This is Tai Chi in Bali.
So Tai Chi is very calm and very deliberate, and I think that is well reflected in this image. So the colors, they're calming and they're cool, but they're not cold. There's a little touch of warmth in that green. And the shape of the pagoda, I think that's what it is. And the woman, they have a lot of parallels. The curve of her hand matches the curve of the roof. Her stance is well rooted, as is the pagoda, and they're both on really solid, stable ground. There are some details in the silhouette, and I like this because it gives a little dimensionality to a flattened composition. There's a light that runs diagonal through the sky, and it gives a little bit of flow. And just experiment, it's like you might want to try flipping the orientation so she's facing the other way. It can just to give it a different feeling and see psychologically how that feels.
And the maker is Fred Finney. This is Pink Moon over Grass Valley.
So that moon has a halo. So hopefully that, will foretell good things for everybody. It's a classic Grass Valley scene, and it's a piano, I'm assuming. And it looks like it was a really well done piano. It's like there's not a lot of distortion. The verticals, they're very nice and straight. And the street lights, you know, it's like they're not blown out. The light on that is really well controlled. The light on this is really well exposed, and I think it's very well done. I also like the little light streak from the car that kind of helps bring the library, connect the library with the building next door.
And the maker is George Pelpel. This is Super Flower Blood Moon Sequence over Lake Tahoe.
So I've really admired these type of composited images just because it shows the passage of time, how things change, and they take a lot of planning and patience, and you know, both the setup and the editing. And I think the photographer did an excellent job, you know, showing all the different phases of the moon. And I think the composition is really well done. You know, you've got, you know, this kind of this brighter area of the galaxy near the moon, but it doesn't, neither one kind of overpowers the other. You've got this arc of the moon that draws your eye down to the lake, and then you've got a little bit of the reflection that'll bring your eye down into the foreground. And then this bush, you know, you've got this huge bush in the foreground, but I think that it works because it connects the foreground to the middle ground and the sky, and then that just brings your eye up and keeps your eye circling.
The maker is Kirk Keeler, and that ends manipulated. Now we are in black and white. This is Rock Formations, Sand Harbor Beach, Lake Tahoe.
So this feels very zen to me. It's very minimalist, but it's all about the shapes and the balance, and I think it's very well done. I mean, you could almost split it into two, make a diptych, but I actually like it as is. I mean, the rocks are comfortably placed into the frame, and they're proportionately placed in relation to each other. The single rock on the left, I like that it has you know, it's visual weight that is balanced out by the three rocks to the right of it. So it gives a little, and it has a really nice repetition in form, and those vertical lines, you know, kind of match each other. It just could be my screen, but there feels like there's a little bit of a green cast to it. So, and that's easily adjusted. And the highlight on the left rock feel a little bright, but that could also just be my computer. So.
And the maker is Kirk Keeler. This is On the Verge, Fraser Falls.
So I know this place. I was here less than a month ago, but it didn't have this wonderfully dynamic sky, and you know, the water wasn't as full. But what I really like is this relationship between the clouds and the waterfall, because they're both they're tumbling, they're dramatic, and they're, you know, pushing water through the landscape. And they also create this diagonal line with each other. And yeah, so that helps draw your eye through the scene and all the way into the back, and you know, to just take in this whole scene. And it's all, you know, it's nice and sharp all the way through. The only thing I might consider tweaking is bringing down the brightness of the clouds on the left a little bit, and just to give it a little more detail. But overall, it has nice contrast, punchy, but not overdone.
And the maker is Eric Engels. This is What's Up?
So what I found interesting about this image was that the glass also, it shows the town upside down, but it also has reflections of buildings that are not part of that flipped image, and they reflect onto the ball itself. And so it kind of creates this double or even triple exposure if you want to count the background. And so, well, not exposure, but it just creates all these different layers that kind of build on top of each other. I really like this. There's this really nice light rim of light on the top of the dark edge, so that gives it a nice separation from the background, nice chiaroscuro. I think placing the tree in the center is actually, I think that really kind of works. It connects the bottom and the top. And it kind of looks like a Pokemon ball too. And I think if you did something with the bottom to kind of root it down rather than just have it stop, I think that would make it a stronger image.
And the maker is Bernadette Sylvester, and that ends black and white. And now we are going to color. The first image is Birdies to Come.
I think this is both cute and clever because the humor comes through really easily. It's very easy to relate to. And I think it's really well executed. The muted colors was and neutral background, they really allow this bright colors of balls to take center stage and then the top. The rounded shapes are repeated in the nest, in the balls, and even those little dimples, whatever the right word is. And that really gives it a unity and depth. I think the placement of the frame is fine. It's not perfectly dead center, and just having it slightly off kilter kind of works with the humor. And yeah, the lighting is even and it's nice. It gives the balls a little shine and definition. And I really wouldn't change anything.
And the maker is Ingrid Lockhart. This is Rainbow Web.
There it is. All right, so there's something very pleasing about the color and the feeling of this image. I mean, the rainbow hues on the spider web, they're you know, it's like I don't think I've seen ones quite like that before, but they're very pretty. You know, there's nice jewel tones, and they kind of really play off the colors that are in the background. So I think they really kind of complement each other. It has kind of a mysterious and serene feeling. The light comes down from the upper right-hand corner, and that kind of, and those branches coming down kind of emphasize it. So the foliage, the green bit in the front, I mean, on one hand, you have to have a sense of mystery peeking through, but I also feel it's also a bit of distraction to the rest of the image. So I'd either just go full bore and, you know, maybe add some more in, or just find a way to take it out altogether.
And the maker is Jonathan Beth. This is Junkyard Cat.
Oh, look at that baby. I love all the textures and shapes and colors of that junk that this cat is. I mean, he looks like he's very fierce. The quality of the light is really nice, and it actually hits the eyes of the cat and gives them a little bit of a catch light. The focus is sharp in the front, you know, you get the eyes nice and sharp, and then it just falls, the sharpness falls away. So you keep the focus, you know, towards the front. I like, you know, the coat of the cat is kind of blends in, and so he really feels like he's part of the environment. I like the organic, you know, there's the shapes that, you know, are repeated, and then there's a line in the ear that runs kind of diagonal, and it draws your eye down to the face of the cat. So I really don't think I change anything.
And the maker is Ray Lurkey. This is Be Careful of the Red Tape.
Well, there's a lot of red tape and a lot of chaos to cut through here. In terms of colors, you know, the red is an excellent contrast to like the blue and the green and even the browns that are prominent in this image. There's also a contrast between like the geometry of the blue background and then the red curving lines of, you know, the foreground, and they also draw, you know, act as the leading line to draw your eye into the action. It feels chaotic, and which is what red tape is good at creating. It looks like a muddy, gritty, wet day, and you can kind of feel the struggle. I do find the branches in the foreground and the person on the right-hand side to be a little bit distracting, but you could probably, with a little work, you could actually probably get those out. And maybe you want to cut down the chaos a little, you can actually put a vignette around it to kind of keep your eye in.
And the maker here is John Siebert. This is Crown of Glory.
So the very first thing my eye goes to is that honeybee. The movement of I really like the movement of those wings. It kind of looks a little bit like water, and it has this movement and an action, and then it's just, you know, kind of a unique feature. But I like how the butt is all sharp and clear, and it just is really detailed, and that warm color contrasts nicely with the cooler color of the flower that frames it. So there's nice separation between the background and the flower. I think it, you know, it fits well in the frame. There's the yellow on the left is a little bit bright, and you might want to bring that down a bit. But that's about the only thing I think I would really change.
And the maker is Lori Woodhall. This is Inverted Cascade Canal Autumn Reflection.
So this feels a little bit like stained glass to me. I mean, at least, you know, if you like melted it a little and let it fuse, but I really like the liquidy impressionism, and it feels, and it's very pleasing. Like the color palette, it's very bright and cheerful. There's some interesting shapes and patterns that are created, and they, you know, there's a flow and a variety to it. It has a very peaceful summery day feeling, and the draw and your eye kind of wanders up and down the image. So I might bring the brightness around some of the edges down a little bit, and then maybe bring the brightness in the middle up just a bit, just to kind of really emphasize those bright yellows in the middle.
And the maker is Tom Quinn. This is Wild Horse Paradise.
Yeah, so I mean, there have been, all the horse images have been really wonderful, and it's nice to see more. So there's a peaceful quality of this image. It's like they all have relaxed body language. It looks like they're just peacefully munching their heads off. And what I find interesting about this is there are a lot of really strong horizontal lines that really build on top of each other and kind of draw your eye through the scene. So you've got lines on the bottom, even how the horses are aligned are kind of horizontal, and the river and the mountains, and even in the clouds, there are some horizontal lines, but then you get the verticals of the trees to kind of break it up and, you know, tie the image together. Maybe you could throw a little vignette on there, but I don't really think there's much that I would change about this.
And the maker is Bill Wages. This is Forest for the Trees.
So, you know, I thought the title, you know, gave it more interesting meaning to it. It gives, so with the double exposure, there's like a sense of struggling to like see clearly, you know, what's there. It's, you know, it's like, and then there's a contrast between the texture of the wood and the softness of the leaves behind it. And then you're not really sure like what's forward, what's real, and what's not. But you know, it almost kind of doesn't matter, because I think, you know, it's a, you know, kind of, it's like a fun image. You know, like there's a lot of nice strong vertical lines that will bring your eye up and down, but then there's like soft organic shapes and colors to kind of break that texture. Nice colors, nice lighting.
And the maker of that was Mike Shea. So this is our last image of this category. It's Wet Texture and Glow.
Wait, was this?
Of this category. It's not the last image. Do you have something else, Ellen?
I didn't get this one.
Oh.
Okay, all right, well, let's see. Well,
let's put you on the spot.
All right, let's put me on the spot. So, yeah, I like the verticals of that are kind of created by the water. There's, you know, there's movement, there's energy, and it's a kind of a contrast to the hard plains of the rock. There's some warm and cool colors. The crop isn't quite as square. I wonder what would happen if you gave it a, what if you did a square crop? Yeah, I mean, I think the crop is fine. Maybe you could give it a little bit of a square. It's like it's got a bit of a vignette. Yeah.
Okay, that was, thank you for, sorry to put you on the spot. That was, the maker was Jim Bear. And that ends color. And we have one more category, which is not critiqued. And this image is looking familiar. It's called A Glimmer of Hope by Rick Ashleman. And I think what we probably learned from this is that he was out shooting with George Pelpel. So thank you for sharing your image with us, Rick. Share the love, Nevada County. Clearly we are. Give you a few minutes to soak this one in. or a minute. That's what we all get. Bless you. All right, so that is the end of our image critique tonight, and I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to thank both Charles and Ellen very much for being our critiquers tonight. There, she's back. Were you attacked by your cat? And back to you, Rachel.
Okay, all right. Well, I will echo Kathy's comments. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Ellen. I would think it's a little bit intimidating to step into a club you've never been to before and not only do a great presentation, but also critique. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. You guys are super talented. Keep going.
Oh, thank you. We
Yeah.
love it. That's for sure.
And I'd love to explore coming back and doing something in person with you guys. Maybe.
Yeah, do. Please do.
Yeah, you know, we have plenty of places for you to stay. So,
Great.
so yeah. If
My
you come
sister
up-
lives in Sparks, so it's probably not that far.
It's about an hour and 40 minutes. From
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah. So
We'd
please
love to
let us
see you.
know. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, as we close out tonight's meeting, next meeting is July 26th. We are meeting in July. We used to not to do that, but we do have a meeting scheduled for July 26th. Make sure that's on your calendar. Don't forget to vote for all these beautiful images you saw tonight, and vote for your favorites by category by Friday before the next meeting on July 26th. And then this has been recorded, so I will stop the recording here in a minute. And then I will upload it to YouTube and it will be available on the club's website. You have to log in. I got several questions about where to find the videos. If you go to the club's website, log in, and then down the right-hand side, there's all those links. You'll see one that says meeting videos, and you should find all of our monthly meetings available to you. You don't have to log in. You should be able to just click it and watch the meeting video if you'd like to do that. So. And revisit Charles. I'm thinking go back and look at his notes, his books, and that kind of thing. So, all right, that should be uploaded by the end of the week. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, everybody. Have a happy and safe 4th of July. And we'll see you guys in July. Excuse me.
Thank you, Rachel.